Tonight, we commence a great and sacred voyage, a pilgrimage not measured in terrestrial leagues or celestial latitudes, but in the quiet, inward revolutions of the spirit, in the subtle, seismic shifts of perception that occur when the soul finally turns its gaze upon its own source. We embark upon a gentle yet profoundly transformative odyssey into a truth that is both elegantly simple and mysteriously infinite, a truth as fluid and ancient as the primordial oceans themselves, whose waters have cradled the genesis of all life, and as constant and watchful as the fixed guiding stars in the celestial vault, whose silent light has illuminated the paths of seekers for millennia. It is the timeless, liberating truth of non-resistance, a principle not of the world, but one upon which the very cosmos seems to turn. Understand with the fullness of your being, this is not a doctrine of grim, resigned surrender in the face of adversity, nor is it a creed of weakness or passive, hopeless acquiescence to a fate deemed unkind. It felt like a direct personal challenge to his very identity, to all he held as fundamental, unassailable truth. "I do not fight it," he retorted, his voice tight and sharp with defensiveness, a blade of pride. "I command it. This is the solemn, sacred duty of a worthy captain. We do not permit the water to push us about like a fallen, mindless leaf. We master it. We bend it to our will. We impose order upon its chaos." "I see," the old sailor replied, his tone gentle and accepting, devoid of any argument, creating a space for truth rather than a battlefield for opinions. "And how does it feel to command it? How do you feel in your body, in your spirit, at the closing of each day, when the journey is done and the silence returns?" "Spent," Hiroshi confessed, a flash of hot frustration and something else, something akin to deep, unacknowledged vulnerability, a crack in the armor coloring his voice. "Utterly spent, hollowed out. This labor is demanding. It requires everything, every last drop. But it is the toll of performing it correctly. It is the necessary, honorable price of mastery. The fatigue is the proof of the effort." The old sailor nodded slowly, as if absorbing this truth with great seriousness, weighing it in the scales of his own vast experience, and was silent for a very long while, letting the lessons settle not in words, but in the space between them. The only sounds were the hypnotic, rhythmic lap of water against the hull, the mournful, solitary cry of a distant heron, and the strained, ragged, desperate rhythm of Hiroshi's labored breathing. Then he posed another question, deceptively simple, almost childlike in its phrasing. "Captain, have you ever truly observed a piece of driftwood journeying downstream?" Hiroshi, baffled and still vexed by this seemingly irrelevant line of questioning, grunted in dismissive response. "Naturally, everyone has. It is a common sight, a piece of debris. It is nothing. Observe it now, in the quiet, focused theater of your mind," the old man invited softly, his gaze fixed not on Hiroshi, but on the flowing, endless water itself. Does the driftwood struggle? Does it strain against the current? Does it grow calloused from its efforts? Does it grow weary? Do you see it battling the water, arguing with its course, shaking its wooden fist at the sky? "No," Hiroshi said, almost scoffing at the sheer, obvious absurdity of the notion. "Of course not. That is ridiculous. It is merely a piece of wood, inert and passive, devoid of will. It simply floats. It goes wherever the water carries it, without protest, without opinion. It possesses no will of its own. It is nothing but a victim of the current." "And yet," the old sailor said, allowing those two pregnant, pivotal words to hang in the air, suspended like the morning mist over the water, dense with unspoken meaning. And yet, it arrives downstream, does it not? It completes the journey. It moves with the river, not against it. And you may have perceived, in your travels, if you looked without prejudice, it often travels swifter and with more direct, unerring purpose than the boats that fight the current with all their might. And it assuredly expends no effort whatsoever. It does not combat the river's immense primal power, Captain. It utilizes it. It borrows it. It becomes one with it. The river does not carry it as a burdensome foreign weight. The driftwood is simply an expression, a temporary manifestation, a dance of the river's own inherent intelligent flow. It is the river, for a moment, expressing itself as wood. This simple observation, this quiet, potent, luminous image of the effortless, floating, trusting driftwood, planted a tiny, fragile but tenacious seed in the hardened, untilled, barren soil of Hiroshi's mind. It was a seed of doubt, not a destructive, cynical doubt, but a curious, wondering, liberating one, a hairline fissure that began to silently crack the bedrock of his certainty, a single ray of light in a dark room. What if my understanding all these years has been fundamentally flawed? What if all my strain has been a profound misunderstanding? What if another path, a different way of being with the world, actually exists? His arms screamed with a deep, bone-deep, familiar fatigue. His body was weary, so profoundly, utterly weary of this endless, lonely, thankless war. And something in the old man's profound, unshakable, radiant calm was beginning to whisper, like a distant melody, to a very deep, very exhausted, very forgotten part of his soul. Reluctantly, hesitantly, almost against his own volition, as if his hands acted before his mind could protest. His fingers loosened their desperate, white-knuckled death grip, and he surrendered the long, worn, familiar steering pole to the old sailor. What transpired next was not merely a lesson. It was a revelation, an epiphany written in water and motion. A silent, beautiful, profound symphony of effortless, intelligent, cooperative action. The old man did not seize the pole with a warrior's grip, with tension and intent. He held it lightly, almost delicately, with a relaxed awareness, as if it were a natural, sensitive extension of his own being. A feather in his hand, a paintbrush for the water. When the current pushed the boat to the left, he did not brace and push back. No, he first felt the push. He listened to it with his entire body, sensing its intention, its direction, and its inherent strength with the receptivity of a lover. He comprehended its purpose within the river's grand design. And then, with a grace that seemed almost divine, a movement of pure intelligence, he angled the boat just slightly, minutely, using that very push, that identical force Hiroshi had battled so fiercely against, to augment their forward momentum, to add to their speed, to partner with the energy. It was a subtle, beautiful, almost invisible adjustment, a sacred collaboration with the elements, a conversation without words. When the wind gusted from behind, he did not perceive it as a threat to his discipline. He smiled, a small, private, knowing smile of recognition and gratitude, and adjusted the sail with a few gentle, knowing, precise tugs of a rope. And suddenly, magically, the wind was no longer a foe, but a willing, powerful companion. A silent, joyous ally propelling them gently, swiftly, joyfully on their way. A friend he had been fighting all his life. The boat, which had always been an instrument of strain and struggle, a prison of effort, began to glide. It moved smoothly, silently, effortlessly, parting the water like a silk ribbon slipping through still air, a swan on a lake. And to Hiroshi's utter, jaw-dropping astonishment, it was progressing faster and with more direct, unwavering, intelligent purpose than it ever had under his own strained, forceful, ignorant command. And the old sailor, he appeared profoundly peaceful, centered, and yet fully engaged. His movements were minimal, precise, flowing, economical. He was not fighting the river. He was engaged in a silent, beautiful, intimate, reciprocal dialogue with it. He was dancing with the water and the wind, a willing, graceful partner in a timeless, universal ballet. "Now you try," the old sailor murmured softly, his voice a gentle current itself. Drawing Hiroshi from his stunned, humbled reverie, he returned the pole. "Do not think, do not plan, do not calculate, merely feel. Feel the current as a living, intelligent thing. When the water pushes, do not push back. That is the first and most essential step, the great unlearning. Simply feel it. Surrender to the sensation without judgment. Then pose a new, different question to yourself. Instead of asking, how do I defeat this push? Ask, how can I use this push? How can I welcome it as a gift? How can I permit it to aid me to become a part of my journey? Hiroshi accepted the pole, his mind reeling, his ancient, ingrained automatic habits screaming in frantic protest, his primal, conditioned instinct, as the current tugged once more, was the familiar, compelling one, to tense, to brace, to fight, to assert his separateness. But he remembered the old man's words, not as a command, but as an invitation to a new life. Feel the current. He drew a breath, a deep, slow, authentic, cleansing breath for the first time that day, and allowed his grip to soften, his shoulders to drop, his jaw to unclench. He permitted the boat to move with the current just a little, surrendering to its will for a single, terrifying, yet profoundly exhilarating moment of trust. And then, with a touch so light it was scarcely a thought, an intention rather than a force, he redirected that energy, that inherent borrowed power, and the boat corrected its course without any struggle, without any conflict whatsoever, as if by magic. It was magic. It was grace. It was the quiet, practical miracle of non-resistance in action. For the ensuing hour, he practiced this new way of being, this new, revolutionary relationship with the world. At times he erred, overcorrected, and they drifted off course. But correcting their path required a mere fraction, a tiny spark of the energy his previous fighting had ever demanded. There was no frustration, only a quiet, interested process of learning, of adjustment, of fine-tuning this new instrument of cooperation. Gradually, a new sensation began to blossom in the place where his chronic, lifelong tension had resided, a feeling of partnership, of collaboration, of a deep, respectful, awe-filled friendship with the river itself. The river was not his adversary. It was a powerful, ancient, intelligent, conscious force, and he was learning, syllable by syllable, its sacred, flowing, silent language. He was learning to dance, and the dance was joy. By midday, they had traversed a greater distance than on any prior journey in his memory, and Hiroshi felt not exhausted, but vibrantly alert, awake, present, truly alive for the first time in years, engaged, yet not strained. His body was active, but it was not at war. His mind was focused, but it was not desperate, not clinging. He felt a quiet, effervescent joy bubbling up from within, a joy he had not experienced since he was a boy, first discovering the simple, mystical wonders of the water before he was taught to conquer it. This is extraordinary, Hiroshi uttered, his voice filled with awe and a newfound, humbling, life-altering clarity. I have practiced this art, this supposed art, for 15 years. I believed I knew all there was to know, every secret, and I never, not once, grasped the first, the most fundamental, the most important principle of it all. I was mastering the wrong thing. The old sailor offered a warm, gentle, crinkling smile that reached the corners of his deep, calm, timeless eyes. It is not your fault, Captain. It is the fault of no one. Most of us are instructed from a young age that true, valuable effort must feel like force, like strain, like a battle won. We are taught to believe, deeply and wrongly, that if an action feels easy, flowing, and joyful, we must be indolent, we must be errant, we are not trying hard enough. We tragically, painfully conflate struggle with virtue, and exhaustion with the only valid proof of dedication. But observe nature, the greatest, most patient teacher of all. The tree does not struggle to grow. It simply reaches naturally and inevitably, organically, for the sun, following the light. The river does not fight to flow. It simply follows the path of least resistance, the innate, topographic wisdom of the land. The bird does not exhaust itself to fly. It opens its wings in perfect trust and is borne aloft by the air in a perfect, weightless partnership. They merely express their true, effortless nature. They cooperate with the fundamental, graceful, intelligent way of the universe, not against it. This is the Tao, the way. This is the Dharma, the natural law. This is the way of peace, the path of the sage. When they reached their destination, the old sailor prepared to depart, gathering his few simple belongings. He thanked Hiroshi for the passage, his gratitude simple and sincere, then paused, turning back one final time, his form silhouetted against the bustling, noisy port, a figure of stillness in a world of motion. Remember this lesson, he said quietly, his eyes holding Hiroshi's with profound, unforgettable significance, a gaze that seemed to see into his future. For its application extends far beyond rivers and boats and winds. In all of life, in every trial, in every transformation, in every moment of anguish or frustration, in every conflict of the heart, we are presented with a choice, a fundamental orientation of the soul. We can battle against reality, against what already is, against the unchangeable facts of the past and the present moment. Or we can learn to work with it, to flow with it, to find the hidden current within the obstacle itself. Both choices demand energy, Captain. Make no mistake, both require your life force, but only one bequeaths peace. Only one bestows true, enduring, unassailable strength. Only one leads you home. He offered one final, gentle blessing of a smile, a silent transmission of understanding, then turned and walked slowly, purposefully away, dissolving into the crowds of the bustling port town, leaving Hiroshi not with a sense of loss or absence, but with a completely new, living, breathing understanding, a new compass for his entire existence, a star to steer by. From that day forth, Hiroshi's life was utterly, beautifully transfigured. He learned to interpret the river's moods not as impediments or personal insults, but as invitations to learn, as valuable, timely intelligence to be heeded and respected. It is, rather, a revelation of a formidable, often overlooked strength that resides not in hardness, but in sublime pliability. the supple, unbreakable strength of the mighty bamboo grove, which bows with graceful, intelligent deference before the typhoon's furious, earth-shaking onslaught, yet remains miraculously unbroken, its vital essence preserved precisely because its roots clutch deep, deep within the enduring, unshakable heart of the earth. It is the patient, inexorable, world-shaping strength of the river, which over countless eons sculpts the unyielding granite cliff, not through violent, shattering force and opposition, but through its persistent, gentle, and eternal presence, wearing away all resistance with the soft, insistent, devotional kiss of water, a love that knows only how to caress. It is the sublime, innate wisdom of flowing, of harmonizing, of moving in sacred, intelligent alignment with the great, unfolding tapestry of what is, rather than exhausting the precious, finite resources of the soul in a futile, draining, and ultimately vain war against the unchangeable, irrevocable currents of reality. He discovered that accepting the river's immense ancient power did not equate to surrendering his own agency or will. It meant aligning with a greater benevolent power, cooperating with a cosmic force that could carry him effortlessly toward his goals, if he only had the wisdom to allow it. His work became a joy, a moving, active meditation, a daily celebration. He arrived at his destinations feeling not drained and hollow, but refreshed, whole, energized, and intimately connected to the world flowing around him. He had uncovered the great, liberating spiritual paradox that the most arduous, draining endeavor in the world is not compelling reality to conform to your small personal will. The most arduous and ultimately the most rewarding sacred undertaking is learning to cease fighting and to courageously, wisely commence flowing. Our journey continues now from the flowing, yielding waters of the river to the solid, silent, enduring, majestic heart of the mountain. We turn now to a second truth, a truth about seeing, about perception, about the great liberation that arises when we gaze upon the world not with the heavy, burdened, knowing eyes of an expert, but with the fresh, wondering, innocent, receptive eyes of a beginner, for whom everything is still a miracle. In the profound, ancient tradition of Zen, this is known as Shoshin, the beginner's mind. It is a mind that is open, vast, and receptive, like a clear, boundless, cloudless sky, ready to receive whatever passes through without judgment or resistance, endlessly, passionately curious, like a child witnessing the first, magical, silent snowfall of their life, each flake a universe of wonder, and wonderfully, blessedly free from the immense, crushing, paralyzing burden of already knowing everything, of having all the answers. It is a mind that greets each moment as if it were pristine, virginal, completely new, brimming with infinite mystery and potential, a gift never before opened. To comprehend this truth not as a concept, but to feel its gentle, transformative power, rearrange the very furniture of your perception. We journey now to a high mountain village, nestled in a valley where the air is thin and pure as a prayer, and the deep, profound silence is broken only by the distant, resonant, rhythmic, purposeful ring of hammer and chisel. A village renowned for centuries across all the land for its master sculptors, whose work seemed to breathe with a life not entirely their own. In this village, there dwelled a sculptor named Isamu. From his earliest youth, he had been hailed as prodigiously, undeniably, blazingly gifted, a child of the stone. His hands were strong and clever. His eye for proportion, balance, and form was said to be unparalleled, almost supernatural. He could observe a raw, unhewn, imposing, silent block of granite, cold and seemingly lifeless to the ordinary eye, and in his mind's brilliant, demanding eye, he would immediately envision the perfect, flawless, complex form he would force from its stony prison, liberating it by sheer will. A rearing stallion, muscles coiled in dynamic tension, a dancing goddess, robes flowing in an unseen, captured wind, a complex, dramatic, multi-figured tableau of heroes and dragons locked in epic, frozen struggle. He perceived the stone as an adversary to his genius, a formless, chaotic, stubborn mass that must be conquered, dominated, subjugated, and bent to the fierce, unwavering singular will of his powerful imagination. And thus, his workshop, though filled with the finest, sharpest, most expensive tools money could procure, was not a sanctuary of creation, but a battlefield, a theatre of war, a chamber of struggle. The air was thick with the palpable, suffocating tension of his perpetual struggle. The sound was not the gentle, exploratory, respectful tap-tap-tap of discovery and conversation, but the violent, jarring, angry crack and ping of conflict, of hard metal meeting unyielding, resistant stone in a clash of titans. He warred with every stone he encountered, his muscles straining, his brow perpetually furrowed in furious, unrelenting, concentrated effort. He shattered chisels that had served other, more patient, wiser masters for decades. He fractured costly, magnificent, irreplaceable blocks of marble and granite, their beautiful, subtle, unique veins betraying his aggressive, unyielding, ignorant approach. His hands, though immensely skilled and powerful, were a tapestry of scars and fresh, stinging wounds, medals from a war he believed was imperative, a necessary noble rite of passage for a true, respected artist. The other, elder sculptors in the village, men and women whose hands were gnarled and wise like the roots of ancient trees, would sometimes pause at his threshold, observing the desperate, lonely struggle with sorrowful, compassionate, knowing eyes. "Isamu," they would say, their voices weathered and calm, smooth and deep like river stones turned by centuries of water. "You must listen. The stone is not mute. It is not inert, dead matter. It has a voice, a quiet song of its own, a soul. It will reveal to you, if you are quiet enough, patient enough, humble enough to hear, what it yearns to become, what form sleeps within it. You must engage it in a dialogue, a partnership, a courtship." But Isamu would dismiss this with a brusque, impatient wave of his hand, not even glancing up from his furious, focused assault. "Stone does not speak," he would mutter, his voice taut with effort and disdain, a hammer striking an anvil of certainty. "That is sentimental folly, the superstitious talk of old men and women who have forgotten the fire, the passion of true creation. Stone is inert matter. It is to be vanquished, shaped, dominated, mastered. True mastery is victory over the unyielding. It is a test of wills, and mine must be stronger." Then, a commission arrived that represented the undisputed crowning pinnacle of any sculptor's career, the dream of a lifetime. The great monastery on the neighboring sacred mountain peak required a grand, awe-inspiring memorial stone to honor its founding abbot, a sage of legendary, timeless wisdom. It was to be the largest, most significant, most visible work in a generation, a piece that would stand for centuries, speaking to pilgrims and monks alike. The village elders, after much solemn deliberation, and acknowledging Isamu's unparalleled technical skill, his brilliant draftsmanship, and his burning, palpable, driving ambition, selected him for the momentous, daunting task. Isamu was filled with a triumphant, consuming, ecstatic fire. This was his moment to validate his entire philosophy, to demonstrate to the world, once and for all, the supreme, unstoppable power of a will that would not yield, a will that could shape the very earth to its desire. To truly comprehend this truth at a level beyond the intellectual, to feel its resonant frequency vibrate in your very marrow and breathe it into the essence of your being until it becomes the very air you inhale, we shall embark together upon the quiet, reliable vessel of your imagination, that sacred inner space where all possibilities are born. Let us travel together to a different age, a more contemplative and unhurried time, where the noise of the world has faded to a distant whisper and the voice of wisdom can be heard clearly. We journey now, in heart and mind, to the mist-shrouded serene banks of a wide, ageless river, many generations in the past, a river that has forgotten more history than we will ever know. Conjure this river now in your mind's eye, with all the vividness and loving attention you can muster. Behold its vast, shimmering, seemingly endless expanse, a great liquid mirror of polished obsidian, perfectly reflecting the soft, pearlescent, nascent light of the emerging dawn, holding the sky within its depths. The air here is pristine and cool, carrying upon it the rich, earthy, profoundly comforting perfume of the riverbank, the scent of wet, smooth stone worn by time, of freshwater reeds bending in graceful obeisance to the current, of decaying leaves humbly, joyfully returning their essence to the fertile, generous soil from which they first sprang. Listen, with the soul's ear beneath the surface of ordinary hearing. You can hear it beneath everything, a foundational hum, the eternal, hushed, rhythmic murmur of the current, a gentle, aqueous whisper that has echoed without ceasing for millennia, a lullaby for the land. It is the sound of perpetual, purposeful movement, the sound of graceful, intelligent surrender to gravity's loving, omnipresent pull, the sound of life itself, ceaseless and profoundly adaptive, finding its effortless, winding way around every obstacle, through every valley, forever seeking the ocean. Listen to the river's ancient, hypnotic, eternal song, and let it become the sacred, underlying soundtrack to our tale, the rhythm to which our understanding will beat. A long, peaceful, immersive pause, allowing the inner landscape to form. Upon this venerable, wise river, there dwelled a boat captain named Hiroshi. His vessel, the river kite, was a sturdy and deeply cherished craft, its wooden hull smoothed to a silken warm patina by years of ardent sun and caressing patient water, its sail mended time and again with the devotion and care one gives to a lifelong companion. His intellectual cartographic knowledge of the river was vast and formidable, a complex, living, three-dimensional map etched into the very folds and convolutions of his analytical mind. He knew the secret name and precise location of every submerged rock that lurked like sleeping, treacherous giants in the tea-colored, mysterious depths, every swirling, treacherous vortex that could ensnare the careless, arrogant navigator, every tranquil, sun-dappled pool where the fish gathered in shimmering, synchronized silver schools. He knew the river with the calculating, categorizing mind of an expert, but he remained a profound stranger to its pulsing, living, spiritual heart. You see, Hiroshi believed, with every fiber of his being, with a conviction as solid as the earth itself, that a worthy captain must conquer the river. He was unshakably convinced that true mastery equated to absolute control, to domination, to the forceful, unyielding imposition of his individual will upon the powerful, flowing, collective body of the water. He saw himself as a solitary warrior, a hero in a personal epic, and the river was his eternal, formidable adversary to be vanquished, subdued, and dominated with every single journey. When the current pulled with insistent, undeniable natural strength to the left, whispering of a simpler, older, more efficient path it had carved through the ages, he would strain with all his might against it, his entire being a manifesto of opposition. His muscles would cord into rigid, painful, protesting cables, his knuckles bleaching a stark white upon the smooth, worn wood of the steering pole as he fought, with grim determination, to compel his boat back to the unyielding, straight, artificial line he had so rigidly charted in his mind, a line that existed only on paper. When the wind swelled powerfully from behind, a great, invisible, benevolent ally offering its boundless, propulsive aid, he perceived it only as a threat to his authority, a challenge to his command, an insult to his autonomy. He would battle against it, digging his pole deep into the resistant riverbed, his body transforming into a wall of defiance, a statue of resistance, refusing to let the wind dictate his pace or his path. He saw the river and the wind as antagonists, forces to be vanquished, obstacles to his sovereign, solitary will. And so, every journey, though ultimately reaching its geographical destination, left him spiritually hollow, an empty vessel, drained of all joy. His shoulders were a permanent, painful cartography of knotted, unresolved tension. His hands were calloused and often blistered from his fierce, unrelenting, desperate grip. He arrived at each dock aching, drained, and weary to the very core of his soul, his spirit frayed and thin. And yet, perversely, he wore this exhaustion as a badge of honor, a testament to his ceaseless, noble struggle, the only proof he recognized of a journey well fought. He would observe other captains who seemed to navigate with an almost effortless, flowing, water-like grace, their movements fluid, serene, and economical, and he would think to himself, with a tinge of scorn and superiority, they are indolent, they are complacent, they do not comprehend the true, noble exertion that is required. They are not true masters of the water, they are merely passengers. One crisp, vibrant, crystalline autumn morning, when the world was aflame in shades of gold and crimson, and a low, spectral, breathing mist rose from the river like a silken, living veil between worlds, Hiroshi came to his boat and discovered an old man resting peacefully in its bow, curled as comfortably and innocently as a sleeping child. The man's hair was as white as the first, pure, untrodden snow of winter, and his face was a beautiful, intricate tapestry of wrinkles, each line a story etched by decades of unblinking sun and whispering wind and quiet, knowing laughter. But when he opened his eyes to offer a gentle, unassuming apology for his trespass, Hiroshi was struck mute, his breath catching. His eyes were as calm, deep, and knowing as the most profound, still pools of the river itself, pools that had witnessed epochs pass. They held no urgency, no anxiety, only a deep, abiding, and unshakable peace that seemed to emanate from him like warmth from a stone in the sun. The old man explained he was a sailor, a wanderer of the waters, and he sought passage down the river to visit an ailing old friend. Hiroshi, though initially reluctant to carry a passenger, and slightly vexed by the intrusion upon his solitary ritual, felt a strange, undeniable pull in his heart, a flicker of profound, irresistible curiosity about this man who carried such celestial, impossible stillness within him. And thus, with a curt, wordless nod, he consented. As they pushed off from the worn, familiar wooden dock, the journey commenced as it always did for Hiroshi, a ritual of conflict. The current, as if testing his resolve one more time, immediately tugged the boat to the left, and instantly, automatically, Hiroshi's body became an instrument of war, a conditioned response of opposition. His jaw clenched into a hard, unyielding line, his breath hitched in his chest. He planted his feet like a fortress foundation upon the planks and began to push back, to fight, to resist with every ounce of his strength, his will a spear against the flow. One could witness the immense, wasteful effort in the rigid, painful line of his back, in the hard, tight, rock-like knots of his shoulders. The wind, too, began to blow, a fresh morning breeze, and he battled it with equal, misguided ferocity, wrestling with the sail as if it were a living, breathing antagonist, trying to wrest control from his hands. His muscles began to ache with the familiar, searing, self-inflicted pain. Sweat began to trace glistening salt-edge paths down his temples and back, despite the morning's invigorating, gentle chill. He was at war, a conflict he had waged every single day of his adult life, a war he believed was not only necessary, but righteous, the very definition of his being. The old sailor did not speak. He did not offer advice. He merely sat at the prow of the boat, observing with a quiet, total attention. Not merely the river, but Hiroshi himself, his stance, his tension, his suffering. He watched the struggle, not with judgment or pity, but with a deep, compassionate, almost scientific curiosity, as one might observe a young, spirited creature trapped in a snare of its own making, a snare it cannot comprehend, because it believes the snare is its own skin. Finally, after a long, tense stretch of this strained, weighty silence, punctuated only by Hiroshi's grunts of exertion and the hypnotic, indifferent lap of water against the hull, the old man spoke. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It was soft, like the sound of reeds along the bank rustling gently against one another in the breeze. A sound that was an intrinsic, natural, seamless part of the river's own eternal symphony. "Captain," he said, the word a gentle invitation, "may I inquire, why do you wage such a fierce, unceasing, solitary war upon the river?" Hiroshi was immediately irritated by the query. The stone arrived on a heavy, groaning cart drawn by a straining, powerful team of oxen. It was a magnificent, colossal, awe-inspiring block of dark, speckled granite, shot through with subtle, silvery, gleaming veins that captured the light like frozen lightning, holding it deep within its stony heart. It was breathtakingly, inherently beautiful. But to Isamu, its inherent beauty was irrelevant, a mere accident of geology, a distraction. It was a canvas, a blank, passive page upon which he would inscribe his vision, his ego. He had already spent weeks, day and night, drafting intricate, impossibly detailed, rigid plans, a complex, multi-figured, theatrical scene depicting the abbot encircled by his devoted disciples, with flowing robes and dramatic, lifelike gestures, a narrative frozen in stone. He assailed the beautiful, silent, patient stone with the confidence of a general leading a final, decisive, glorious charge into battle. But from the very first, fateful, ambitious strike of his hammer, the stone resisted. It possessed its own ancient, immutable, stubborn nature, a character, a soul all its own. It is about approaching our lives, our work, our relationships, and even this very fleeting moment, with the fresh, curious, open, and humble eyes of a beginner, whose greatest wisdom is to know that he does not know, and is therefore miraculously open to everything, to the infinite possibility hidden within the real. Our journey now turns inward, From the flowing, teaching river and the speaking, patient stone, to the quiet, living, fertile, generous heart of the earth itself, we arrive at our third truth, a truth about effort, about the very energy we expend in living, about the economy of the soul. In a world that often clamors with the relentless, exhausting mantra of more, faster, harder, this truth speaks in a gentle, counterintuitive, revolutionary whisper. It is the truth of right effort, of balanced action, of Wu Wei, the art of effortless doing. We are so often instructed, programmed, that struggle is noble, that exhaustion is the inevitable, necessary proof of dedication, that sweat is the only valid currency of achievement. But the Buddha, after years of extreme self-punishing, body-denying asceticism that brought him to the very brink of death and revealed only the limits of the body, discovered a different, more excellent, more sustainable path, the middle way. A path that is neither the harsh, grinding, soul-destroying strain of forcing, nor the lazy, passive neglect of surrender. It is a path of balance, of harmony, of an effort that is wise, sustainable, appropriate, and deeply, intuitively aligned with the natural, effortless, intelligent flow of life itself. To understand this not as a mere abstract concept, but as a sensation you can feel in your bones, in your breath, we now encounter a woman named Miho in a sun-dappled, peaceful valley where her grandmother's legendary, beloved garden awaited her care, a paradise entrusted to her hands. Miho had inherited not merely a plot of land, a piece of property, but a living, breathing legacy, a sacred, holy trust. Her grandmother, Kiyomi, had been a legendary gardener, a virtual sorceress of the soil, a poet of petals. Her garden was a place of pilgrimage for those seeking beauty and profound, healing peace, a vibrant, humming, thriving tapestry of colors, scents, and textures that seemed to thrum with an almost visible, palpable vitality, a hymn to life. When Kiyomi passed, leaving the garden in Miho's young, trembling hands, Miho yearned desperately, achingly to be worthy of this inheritance, to honor the memory of the woman who had first taught her the poetic, secret names of flowers and the feel of rich, living soil between her fingers. And so, she approached her new duty with a fierce, trembling, almost fearful, desperate determination. She believed, with the unshakable conviction of a devoted, anxious disciple, that love was quantified solely by effort, by sheer, visible, measurable labor. And thus, she poured effort into the garden like a tempest, a human hurricane of dedicated, frantic activity. She read every tome, every manual on advanced horticulture, memorizing complex pH levels and rigid, calendar-driven pruning schedules. She labored from the moment the first rose-colored light touched the distant, silent mountaintops until the evening shadows stretched long and indigo across the soil. Her body a constant, tireless engine of work, of doing. Her back ached relentlessly. Her hands grew coarse and stained with earth and sap, and she wore her deep, chronic fatigue as a badge of honor, a proof, a testament to her devotion, her love. Her love was a constant, anxious, controlling doing. She watered the plants thrice daily on a strict schedule, convinced the benevolent, life-giving sun was her antagonist, a thief stealthily stealing precious moisture from her cherished, dependent charges. She pruned incessantly, snipping away any new, green, vibrant growth that dared to deviate from the perfect, symmetrical, geometric, artificial shapes she beheld in her gardening books, shapes that existed nowhere in nature. She waged a relentless, merciless total war campaign against any and all weeds, perceiving them not as a natural, if tenacious, part of the ecosystem, but as vile, unwanted invaders to be eradicated, pulled, the instant their brave green heads appeared above the soil, a sign of her failure. The garden, under her zealous, anxious custodianship, was immaculate, orderly, sterile, controlled, and perfectly, rigidly, deadeningly controlled. But a dreadful, mysterious, heartbreaking phenomenon began to unfold, a quiet rebellion. The garden did not flourish under this deluge of anxious, smothering love. It began to languish, to sicken, to retreat. The leaves of the once vibrant, strong tomato plants turned a sickly, warning pale yellow, curling inward at the edges like pleading, desperate, dying hands. The rose blooms, once large, voluptuous, and fragrant, were now small, pallid, and weak, their petals dropping prematurely to the ground like forgotten sad tears. The zucchini plants grew spindly and feeble, anemic, their fruits shriveling on the vine before they could mature aborted efforts. The more Miho loved them with her frantic, controlling, fearful effort, the more the garden seemed to retreat, to wither, to perish, to give up before her very confused eyes. Miho was first heartbroken, then utterly bewildered, then finally, secretly, deeply resentful. She was executing everything by the book, the perfect student. She was adhering to all the rules, all the schedules, all the expert advice. She was laboring more ardently, more self-sacrificingly than anyone could possibly demand. She was sacrificing her own rest, her own peace, her own joy on the altar of this garden. Why was the garden, her grandmother's sacred, beautiful, trusting legacy, so cruelly, so unfairly failing her? She sat on the old, weathered, beloved wooden bench her grandmother had cherished, her shoulders slumped in utter defeat, watching a lone, bright ladybug traverse a wilting, yellowed leaf, feeling like the most profound, unworthy, tragic failure. It was there, in this state of deep dejection and confusion, that the old farmer, Okada, discovered her. He was a man who had cultivated the neighboring land for 70 years, his life one with the seasons, his body a testament to time. His back was bent like a weathered, patient old tree, and his hands were like a living topographical map of the earth itself. But his eyes held a deep, unshakable, knowing calm, the calm of one who has learned to listen to the land, to hear its whispers. He did not proffer empty, comforting, meaningless words. He simply stood beside her for a time, sharing the heavy, grieving silence of the struggling, suffering garden. "You are laboring very hard, Miho," he said finally, his voice as rough and kind and enduring as aged, sun-baked tree bark. "I am," she replied, her voice thick with unshed tears of frustration, grief, and betrayal. "I am giving it everything I have, my every waking moment, but it is insufficient. It is all dying. I am losing it all." Everything she built. Okada nodded slowly, his wise, old seeing gaze sweeping over the yellowed leaves, the waterlogged, compacted, airless soil. "I perceive your effort," he said, without judgment, merely stating a fact. "It is written in the soil, in the leaves, in the very air here. And I perceive your love, your deep, sincere desire to care for this place, to be worthy. It is palpable, but I suspect perhaps you are loving these plants to death. You are giving them what you think they need, what the books say they need, but not what they actually need, what they are asking for. You are not listening to them." He knelt then, with a soft, practiced, old man's grunt, his movements economical, sure, and respectful. He scooped up a handful of the dark, rich soil. It was good soil, but it clumped together in a wet, dense, suffocating, airless ball. "Observe this," he said, letting it crumble slightly through his knowing fingers. "The roots are drowning. They require water, yes, but they also need to respire, to breathe. They need air in the tiny, vital interstices between the soil particles. You are providing them with so much drink, with such relentless, smothering frequency, they cannot breathe. They are gasping. An excess of a beneficial thing can be as detrimental, as deadly, as a deficiency. It is a form of gentle, well-intentioned, loving suffocation." He then moved to a rose bush she had pruned into a perfect, stark, unnatural, geometric sphere. "Your vocation is to provide the optimal conditions: fertile, living, breathing soil, the appropriate quantity of water, protection from genuine, harmful pests, and then to retreat, to step back, to observe, to trust. The plant already knows, deep in its cellular, genetic memory, how to be a plant. You do not need to instruct it, to micromanage its every moment to be its god. You need only to be its guardian, its friend." This was a revolution, a paradigm shift, an earthquake in Miho's understanding of everything. Love, she realized with a dawning, awe-filled, humbling clarity, was not invariably solely about doing, about intervening, about controlling. Sometimes the most profound, effective, nurturing love was discovered in allowing, in trusting, in creating the space for life to happen. On its own terms, in its own time, in its own wild, beautiful, unpredictable way. And thus, she commenced the arduous, counterintuitive, deeply challenging task of learning to do less. It was, ironically, initially far more challenging, more anxiety-producing than the constant, mind-numbing, familiar labor. The impulse to water, to prune, to interfere, to act, to fix, was a physical, clawing, screaming anxiety in her chest, an addiction to control. But she heeded Okada's wise, simple counsel. She learned to inspect the soil not with a calendar or a schedule, but with her sensitive, bare fingers, her new instruments, irrigating only when it felt authentically, truly dry an inch beneath the surface, a conversation with the earth. She pruned solely when a branch was genuinely damaged or diseased, learning day by day with painful slowness to differentiate between her own compulsive, neurotic desire for tidy, human order and the plant's actual, authentic, natural necessity. Most significantly, she began to dedicate time each day to simply sitting on her grandmother's bench, not as a vigilant, anxious, judgmental taskmaster, but as a patient, loving, grateful observer, a witness to beauty. She watched how the light migrated, danced, across the garden throughout the day. She learned to recognize intuitively the distinction between the thirsty, desperate droop of a plant and its peaceful, contented evening repose. She began to feel the garden's own unique, slow, deep rhythm, its subtle, living pulse, and learned to harmonize her actions with it, to move to its music rather than dictate to it with an iron, foreign will. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, like the first brave green tips of bulbs nudging through the cold soil in the early spring, the garden began to respond, to awaken, to forgive. The yellow, suffocated, sad leaves were replaced by a deep, healthy, vibrant, joyous verdancy. The roses, permitted to grow more freely, to express their own natural, graceful, sprawling shapes, burst into blooms of shocking magnitude, color, and intoxicating, abundant fragrance. The vegetables grew plump, robust, and heavy with life, generous and full. The garden was not merely recovering, It was flourishing with a wild, joyful, unstoppable, overflowing abundance she had never witnessed, even in her grandmother's most celebrated legendary era. It possessed a life, a spirit, a defiant, uncontainable joy of its own, a soul. Miho had discovered the essence of right effort, the heart of the middle way. It is not about perpetual, frantic, ego-driven doing. It is a gentle, attentive, mindful, loving presence. It is the profound, ancient wisdom of knowing when to act and when to allow, when to assist and when to retreat and trust, in an intelligence far older, wiser, and more creative than our own frantic, limited human will. We have learned to flow with the river, to listen to the stone, and to trust the innate wisdom of the garden. Now, we arrive at a truth so vast, so fundamental, that to truly perceive it is to have your entire perception of the world and your place in it forever transfigured, rewoven at the loom of reality. It is the truth of interconnection, of dependent arising, of pratityasamutpada. The beautiful silvery veins were not merely decorative. They were bands of iron-hard, unyielding crystal that shattered his finest, tempered, most trusted chisels, sending painful, jarring, nerve-shocking reverberations up his arms and into his very teeth. A physical no. When he attempted to carve a delicate, precise, planned line for a robe's fold, the stone would fracture in a manner he did not intend, could not predict. A rough, unpredictable, rebellious chip that ruined his perfect, precise intellectual geometry. The more he forced, the more he demanded, the more the stone seemed to push back, to resist his will with a passive, profound, ancient stubbornness, the resistance of being itself. It was a silent, profound, exhausting duel of wills, a battle between human ambition and the soul of the earth, and the earth was winning. Weeks dissolved into a month. The great, once beautiful, promising block was now a scarred and wounded, grieving entity, its surface covered in a chaotic, depressing, ugly web of gashes, misplaced drill holes, and the sad, grey, accumulating dust of his repeated, humiliating failure. Isamu was a spectre of his former self, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion and despair, his spirit as fractured and useless as the growing, tragic pile of broken tools in the dark corner of his workshop. Nothing, absolutely nothing. In this vast, shimmering, boundless universe, from the greatest galaxy to the smallest subatomic particle, exists in true, ultimate isolation. We are not solitary, lonely islands cast adrift in a cold, indifferent, meaningless sea. We are threads, vibrant, unique, and essential threads, in a single, vast, living, breathing, intelligent tapestry of existence. This magnificent, endless tapestry has no true commencement and no final conclusion. It is a process, not a thing. It is being woven, rewoven, and embellished in every single moment, by every breath, by every action and thought, in an unimaginably complex, beautiful, and intelligent pattern that transcends all understanding. To comprehend this not as a dry, intellectual philosophy, but as a felt, living, breathing experience in the heart, we journey now to a village nestled in a gentle, fertile valley, a place renowned for generations for its master weavers, whose fingers speak the language of the loom. And there we encounter a young, brilliantly, fiercely talented woman named Akari. Akari was unquestionably a supremely skilled weaver, a virtuoso of the thread. Her fingers were nimble as hummingbirds, her eyes sharp and discerning as a hawk's. Her innate sense of color, contrast, and pattern was instinctive, bold, innovative, and breathtaking. But her formidable, God-given skill was matched, and in some ways tragically eclipsed, by her fierce, burning, brittle pride in her own absolute, uncompromising independence. She believed, with the unshakable, arrogant certainty of youth and prodigious, unearned talent, that she was the sole author, the only creator, the solitary genius behind her beautiful, intricate works. Her entire creative process was a meticulous, obsessive ritual of staunch, proud self-reliance. She would personally trek to the high, wind-swept, lonely pastures to gather the wool from the sheep herself, selecting only the finest, softest, most perfect, unblemished tufts, rejecting any that bore the slightest, most trivial imperfection. She would painstakingly cleanse and card the wool until it was cloud-soft, pristine, her arms aching with the solitary, proud exertion. She would gather her own plants, roots, and barks for dyes, madder root for a deep, vibrant, bloody crimson, onion skins for a warm, golden, honeyed yellow, walnut hulls for a rich, earthy, grounding brown. She would spend long, solitary, steam-filled hours over bubbling, steaming, witchy cauldrons, her face flushed with the heat and effort, patiently, stubbornly coaxing the sublime, secret colors from the raw, silent materials of the earth. And then, alone in the quiet, sunlit, dusty sanctuary of her workshop, with only the rhythmic, comforting, monastic clack-clack-clack of her loom for companionship, she would weave, lost in her own world. She perceived the beautiful, intricate, stunning tapestries that emerged from her loom, visions of soaring cranes against a tender dawn sky, of deep, mysterious, shadowed forest groves, of starry, infinite, beckoning nights, as products solely of her solitary effort, her solitary vision, her solitary genius. They were hers, and hers alone. The credit and the entire weighty burden of creation were hers to bear alone. A crown of thorns. One tranquil golden afternoon, as the sun poured like warm, liquid, heavy honey through her open window, a traveling nun, a woman of quiet, unassuming demeanor, paused at the entrance to her workshop. The nun was not young, yet it was difficult, impossible to ascertain her age, for her face seemed to hold both the smoothness of youth and the great, deep antiquity of the mountains simultaneously. Her movements were fluid and calm, like deep water, and her eyes held a quiet, absorbing, bottomless depth that seemed to take in everything without a shred of judgment, reflecting it all back with clarity. She stood for a long, silent, respectful time before Akari's latest masterpiece, a magnificent, monumental tapestry featuring a majestic blue heron, standing in profound, timeless stillness in a twilight marsh. The deep, resonant, almost luminous, soulful blue of the bird's wings, the undeniable, breathtaking centerpiece of the entire composition. This blue, the nun said finally, her voice as soft and fine and strong as the spun wool itself. It is extraordinary, truly. It is the very hue of vastness, of depth, of contemplation. It reminds me precisely of the sky over the distant indigo mountains, just as the final, lingering, grateful light of day surrenders completely, peacefully, to the embrace of the night. Akari felt a familiar, warm, proud flush of validation. "I thank you," she said, standing a little straighter, her chin lifting slightly in defensive pride. "I dyed it myself, from a new, secret process I developed through trial and error. It required numerous attempts, many frustrating failures, to finally perfect, to capture this particular, elusive shade. It is my discovery." "I have no doubt," the nun replied, her gaze still fixed upon the tapestry with deep, genuine appreciation, seeing more than just color. Such dedication, such persistence, is evident in its depth. And this wool, it is so resilient, yet so wonderfully supple, alive to the touch. It possesses a certain quiet fortitude, an inner strength. He would sit for hours motionless, merely staring at the ruined, mutilated block, his head cradled in his wounded hands, a profound, cold, hopeless despair settling over him like a heavy, killing final frost. It was in this state of absolute, humiliating, total defeat that the elderly sculptor Fumiko discovered him. She was the oldest living sculptor in the village, a woman so venerated, so revered, she no longer needed to labor. Her own quiet, profound masterpieces standing in temples and gardens across the land, speaking of a deep, patient, timeless wisdom to those who had eyes to see. She moved with a slow, quiet, grounded, effortless grace, as if she herself were composed of the same patient, enduring, eternal stone she had worked with for a lifetime. She did not announce her presence with words. She simply entered the chaotic, heavy stillness of his workshop and stood before the damaged, grieving, silent granite, her hands clasped gently, peacefully behind her back. She walked a slow, deliberate, respectful, complete circle around it, her old, keen, all-seeing eyes missing nothing. The shattered veins, the unintended telling chips, the entire tragic narrative of a fierce, one-sided, futile struggle told in the stark, unflinching language of stone. Finally, after a long, silent, deep communion with the block, she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it seemed to fill the chaotic, tense, anguished space with a sudden, profound, cleansing, healing quiet, like cool water on a burn. "Your drawings are beautiful, Isamu," she said, her tone gentle, devoid of any condemnation or reproach, full of a grandmother's love. "They demonstrate great vision and immense skill, a master draftsman without a doubt. But they are drawings of the stone you wished you had, the stone of your dreams, not drawings of the stone you actually, truly possess. You are trying to put a square peg into a round hole, and you are breaking both the peg and the hole." Isamu, too weary for anger, too defeated for pride, utterly broken, merely looked at her, his eyes hollow and lost, a ship without a rudder. "What then should I do?" he asked, and for the very first time in his adult life, there was a genuine, wide fissure in his certainty, a sliver of true, desperate humility in his voice. "Abandon the commission. Admit my public failure. Throw myself from the mountain." "No," Fumiko replied, a small, knowing, compassionate smile touching her wrinkled, wise lips. "You must abandon your plan, your rigid, predetermined, ego-driven blueprint. For 3 days, you shall not carve. You shall not even lift a tool. You shall not touch hammer or chisel. Your sole task, your only work, is to be with the stone. That is all. It is the hardest work you will ever do. Sit with it in silence. Walk around it at different hours of the day and observe how the transforming, moving light reveals its changing character, its different moods. Touch it with reverence, with curiosity, not with intent to change. Close your eyes and feel its temperature, its varied texture, its unyielding, ancient, powerful strength. Listen to it, not with your ears, but with your hands, with your heart, with your silent, undivided attention. Permit it to teach you what it is. Allow it the time and the space to unveil, slowly, gently, what it might become. You are not the creator here. You are the midwife. It sounded like madness to Isamu, like a recipe for wasted, precious time, like surrender. To do nothing felt like the height of indolence, like a total, shameful capitulation. But his own path, the only path he knew, the path of force and will and struggle, had led only to ruin, despair, and a mountain of dust. Desperation, the great humbler, the final teacher, rendered him willing to attempt anything, even this seeming profound folly. And so, with a heavy, skeptical, reluctant heart, he acquiesced. The first day was pure, unadulterated agony, a battle with his own nature. The urge to act, to rectify, to force, to do, was a physical, crawling, screaming itch in his hands, a torment in his mind. He paced like a caged, restless animal. He stared at the stone, but saw only the errors, the damage, the glaring testament to his failure, his shame. But as the sun journeyed slowly, inevitably across the sky, painting the workshop in shifting, beautiful bands of light and shadow, he began, reluctantly, grudgingly, to notice other things, details previously obscured by his frantic, blind doing. He observed how the morning light, low and golden and soft, set the stubborn, hated silvery veins ablaze with an inner fiery light, rendering them less like flaws and enemies and more like hidden, sacred, shining rivers of light within the stone, a map of its history. He noticed how a deep, accidental chip he had cursed and lamented now cast a long, fascinating, dramatic, beautiful shadow as the day wore on, bestowing upon the stone a sense of depth and mystery and character it had previously lacked. On the second day, his hardened, calcified resistance began to truly soften, like winter ice yielding to the persistent, gentle warmth of the spring sun. He sat on a low stool and simply observed, his breathing slowing, deepening to match the slow, majestic passage of time itself. He ran his hands over the stone surface, no longer judging, but exploring, learning, like a blind man reading a sacred text, its language of smooth and rough, its cool and warm places, its hard and soft spots. He tapped it gently in different places with his knuckle and listened, truly listened, with his whole being, to the subtle, telling variations in its resonance, a hollow, echoing, mysterious sound here, a solid, deep, reassuring thud there. He was, for the first time, learning the stone's native silent tongue, its unique, individual personality, its name. By the third day, a quiet inner miracle had transpired within him. His perception had undergone a complete, utter, glorious metamorphosis. He was no longer seeing the rigid, complex, intellectual, multi-figured scene from his detailed drawings imposed upon the stone like a cage. Instead, he began to perceive a different, simpler, more profound, more powerful form emerging from the stone itself, suggested by its very nature, its wounds, its strengths. The hard, resistant veins were not obstacles to be destroyed. They were the natural, flowing, elegant lines for the folds of simple, humble, monastic robes. The large accidental chip was not a ruinous error. It was the perfect, naturally, divinely carved hollow for a contemplative, shadowed, serene face, turned inward in deep, silent meditation. The stone itself, in its majestic silence, was proposing a form, a single, powerful, solitary universal figure, not in dramatic, external, worldly action, but in deep, serene, inward, timeless meditation, a figure of peace. It was simpler, more austere, more elemental, and infinitely more potent, more true, than anything his ambitious, clever mind had ever conceived. It had been waiting there, sleeping inside the stone all along, waiting for him to be quiet enough, humble enough, still enough to see it, to recognize it. There was something vital, something inherently deeply right about it, something that felt less like it had been carved by human hands and more like it had been discovered, unveiled, gently, respectfully liberated from its stony prison, its true self revealed. The abbot himself, a man of few chosen words, stood before it for a long, silent time, and then remarked, his voice soft with awe and recognition, that it seemed to radiate a silence so profound, so deep. It pacified the restless soul. It calmed the chattering mind. Fumiko came to witness the unveiling, the birth. She stood before the finished piece for a long, long time, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of deep, quiet satisfaction and love. She turned to Isamu and placed a weathered, knowing, blessing hand upon his arm. "Now you comprehend," she said simply, her voice full of a quiet, profound joy. The stone was perpetually endeavoring to reveal this to you. It was always speaking. You merely needed to cease fighting long enough, to become still enough, to lay down your weapons, to listen. Isamu had learned the profound, life-altering lesson that authentic mastery is not about imposing our small personal will upon the world, but about listening deeply, humbly, to what the world is already, perpetually, generously offering. "Of course," the nun said, turning her gentle, penetrating, knowing gaze upon Akari, seeing the wall around her heart. "The transformation is your beautiful, undeniable art. It is your gift, and this loom upon which you perform your art, which holds your vision. It is a fine, sturdy, reliable, noble instrument. It possesses a spirit of immense patience, of steadfastness, of silent support. It was carved from the heartwood of a great ancient oak tree by the old carpenter, Jin, was it not? A man who dedicated 60 years of his life to learning the very soul, the grain, the song of wood, who could feel the story of a tree like a storyteller perusing a sacred, illuminated page. The steadfastness of his experienced, knowing hands, the quiet integrity of his lifelong devoted craft supports every single thread you weave. It is the foundation, the skeleton of your heron. It is Jin's silence that holds your noise." Akari was silent now, her defensiveness beginning to dissolve into a dawning, unsettling, profound confusion. She had never, ever considered the loom as anything more than a tool, a dumb instrument, a means to an end. It had no soul. "And the design itself," the nun continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if sharing a most sacred and precious secret of the universe. "This heron, captured in this posture of perfect, poised, timeless, eternal stillness. You informed the baker's daughter you beheld it in a powerful, vivid, personal dream. You understand the body, the skin of the clay. Now answer me this, from your own direct experience, not from thought. When you lift this bowl, what are you actually lifting? Are you lifting the clay, the substance, the matter? Or are you lifting the emptiness, the space, the nothingness within?" Masaru, having contemplated little else for months, his mind full of this riddle, answered immediately from his intellect, his conditioning. "The clay, unquestionably, obviously. My hands make contact with the solid, real clay. I feel its weight, its resistance. The emptiness inside possesses no substance, no weight, no reality. It is nothing. It is empty. It is non-existent." "Indeed," the monk replied, a gentle, knowing, playful smile playing on his lips. "It has no weight of its own. It is insubstantial. But now, envision this, a simple experiment. I am hungry. I require a bowl so that I may consume soup and nourish this aging, temporary body. You, out of kindness, return to your workshop and bring me a beautiful, solid, perfectly fired, completely solid sphere of clay. There is no opening, no hollow, no emptiness at all. It is all form, all substance. You hand this beautiful, solid, useless sphere to me and declare with confidence, 'Here is your bowl, venerable one.' Would that object, however beautifully, perfectly made, constitute a bowl?" Could I eat soup from it? Masaru stared, the simple, irrefutable, elegant logic of it striking him with the force of a spiritual lightning revelation. No, he admitted, his voice soft with dawning, wondrous understanding. It would not. It could not. It would be a paperweight, a sculpture, a child's ball, a curiosity. But it would not. It could not function as a bowl. It would be useless for its purpose. It would not be a bowl at all. Ah, the monk said, his smile deepening, illuminating his old wise face like a sun. So, the bowl, in its essence, its very bowl nature, its isness, is both the clay and the emptiness. They are not two separate, independent, warring entities. They arise together simultaneously, in mutual, inseparable dependence. They define one another. They necessitate, they require each other for the thing we call bowl to even come into being, to be what it is. The clay bestows form, boundary, limit, and definition upon the emptiness. The emptiness, in turn, bestows function, purpose, use, and meaning upon the clay. The beloved Profound Heart Sutra instructs us, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is precisely emptiness, emptiness precisely form. They are one and the same, indivisible, non-dual reality, merely perceived from two different, complementary, dependent perspectives. The bowl is a relationship, not a thing. The monk then stood, his movements fluid and unhurried, and invited Masaru to walk with him. Come, he said. Let us step outside this room and observe how the entire manifest, wonderful universe collaborates with, depends upon, and celebrates this same universal principle of emptiness, of space. He led Masaru to the temple's great soaring meditation hall, a vast, hushed, serene, empty space. We denominate this a room, the monk said, his voice echoing softly in the spaciousness. But is the room the wood and the plaster of the walls and the roof? Or is the room essentially, functionally, the empty, peaceful, usable, sacred space they create, enclose and safeguard? We do not meditate within the solid walls. We meditate within the spacious, silent, empty emptiness they define, protect, and make possible. The walls are the form, the space is the function, the room is both. They proceeded to a simple, wooden, unadorned doorway. This doorway is useful, is it not? It allows passage, movement, transition. But its usefulness comes not from its wooden frame, but from the empty space, the opening, the void it provides, the gap for us to traverse. Without that emptiness, that gap, it would be a dead end, a mere wall, an obstruction. The frame is the form, the passage is the function, the doorway is both. They stood together before the great ancient bronze temple bell, hanging silent, potent, in its wooden tower. Strike it, the monk instructed. Masaru took the heavy wooden striker and hit the bell firmly, respectfully. A deep, resonant, soul-stirring, world-filling note vibrated through the air, humming in their very bones and echoing across the quiet valley, a wave of sound. That beautiful living sound, the monk said, after the note had faded, dissolved, back into silence. Does it emanate solely from the solid, cast metal bronze? Or does it emanate from, is it born from, the empty space inside the bell, which permits the metal to vibrate freely, to expand and contract, to breathe, to sing its song? The sound is born from the inseparable union, the sacred marriage of form, the bronze, and emptiness, the space. The bell is both. Everywhere Masaru looked now, with his newly opened, awakened eyes, he perceived the same elegant, beautiful, liberating truth. A wheel depends upon the empty space at its hub to revolve around its axle. A pitcher is defined by the void that contains the life-giving water. A window is a hole in a wall. Language depends upon the silence between words to give them shape, meaning, and distinction. Music depends upon the rests, the spaces, the silences between the notes to create rhythm, anticipation, and emotion. Emptiness was not a deficiency, a lack, a negation. It was the fertile, generative, creative ground of all potential, the silent, necessary, vital partner in every single expression of life, the quiet, receptive, feminine yin to the active, assertive, masculine yang of form. It was the canvas for the painting, the page for the word, the silence for the song. Masaru's understanding was utterly, joyfully, completely transformed, reborn. He realized he was not merely a potter shaping inert, dead clay. He was a shaper of space, a sculptor of potential, a creator of relationships, a poet of emptiness. He was utilizing the solid, material clay to define a useful, receptive, sacred, holy emptiness. His work was not ultimately about creating a thing, an object. It was about creating a relationship, a harmonious, interdependent, beautiful relationship between form and formlessness, between substance and space, between the manifest and the unmanifest. He was a bridge between worlds. This truth, when applied to our own being, bestows the greatest freedom, the deepest peace of all. We too are akin to the bowl. Our bodies, our personalities, our histories, our stories are the clay, the beautiful, temporary, ever-changing, ever-aging, decaying form. But our consciousness, our pure awareness, our capacity to experience, to know, to love, is the empty space within. It is the open, aware, boundless, luminous, silent capacity to hold experiences, thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, without being permanently stained, solidly defined, limited, or damaged by them. We are the space in which the content of our lives appears and disappears. These teachings are akin to seeds, planted now in the fertile, receptive, waiting soil of your consciousness. They will germinate in their own mysterious, secret manner, and in their own perfect divine time. They will bear fruit naturally, without your effort. Now, as our journey for this evening draws to a gentle, peaceful close, it is time to rest completely, to lay down the burden of listening, the weight of learning, the effort of understanding. Let your body become heavy, so very heavy, so relaxed, upon the firm, supportive, trusting surface beneath it, surrendering all its weight, all its tension, completely to gravity, to the earth. Let your breath become soft and slow and deep, a gentle, tidal, natural rhythm flowing effortlessly in and flowing effortlessly out, all by itself, without your doing. Let your mind become quiet, releasing its grip, relinquishing every thought, every plan, every memory and every narrative, every worry and every hope. Let them go like clouds passing through a vast, silent sky. There is nothing more to accomplish in this moment. Nowhere you need to journey. Nothing you need to become. You are safe here. You are cradled, held by existence itself. You are, in this moment, profoundly, deeply, completely at peace. The voyage continues in the world of dreams, and in the quiet, unfolding, patient wisdom of the heart. The journey never ends. It only deepens. Sleep profoundly now. Sleep serenely, peacefully. May you awaken whenever you do, with a quiet, unshakable, wordless knowing, a feeling in your bones, in your soul. That peace has always, always resided here, in the very core, the silent center of your being, and that it will never leave you. Good night. But was that not the identical night you sat in the town square and listened to the village elder recount the ancient, beloved universal tale of the silent watcher of the marsh? The heron who perceives the whole truth of the water without ever disturbing, without ever judging its tranquil surface. The story entered your mind like a seed planted in fertile soil. It danced with your childhood memories of real herons in the reeds. It steeped, fermented, in the fertile, dark ground of your subconscious, and your dreaming mind, that great internal cosmic weaver, bestowed upon it this beautiful, new, personal form. The elder's voice, his wisdom, his narrative, transmitted orally through countless generations, is woven directly here, into the very soul, the DNA of this image. His breath is in your heron's lungs. The nun stepped closer, not to Akari, but to the tapestry itself, her hand hovering just above, not touching, the heron's beautifully, perfectly rendered wing. Akari, look, truly behold, with more than just your eyes. See with the eyes of the heart. This tapestry is not solely yours. It is a gathering, a confluence, a congress of the entire cosmos. It is composed of the indigo flowers and the specific, unique, mineral-rich soil of the distant mountains that nourish them. It is composed of the rain that fell from the heavens, from the clouds, upon those flowers and the sun that traveled millions of miles, tirelessly, to grant them the strength, the photons, to blossom. It is composed of Kaito's patient, daily, gentle care, which now resides invisibly in the very fiber, the kindness of the wool. It is composed of Jin's lifelong, accumulated, humble skill, which resides in the silent, strong, reliable frame of the loom. It is composed of the elder's story, his myth, his narrative, which resides in the heart, the meaning of the design. You, dear one, with your talented hands and your focused, passionate mind, are the sacred space, the conscious focal point, the grateful vessel, where all these countless infinite threads of existence finally converged, met, and danced together. You are the point of collaboration for the entire universe in this one beautiful, fleeting, mortal expression. Without any single one of them, the sheep, the rain, the sun, the shepherd, the tree, the carpenter, the storyteller, this particular heron, in this exact sublime form, would not, could not ever exist. You did not create it in solitude, from nothing. You orchestrated it. You midwifed it. You are the weaver, yes, but the threads you wove with are the gifts, the contributions, the very being of the entire world. You are a collaboration, and your masterpiece is the proof. Akari sat down heavily upon her stool, the breath leaving her lungs in a soft, defeated, astonished rush. The room seemed to tilt, spin, and rearrange itself around her. Her entire, carefully constructed, fiercely defended sense of self, her proud, solitary, independent identity as a self-made, self-sufficient creator, shattered and fell away like a piece of flawed, fired, broken pottery, leaving her naked, exposed, and connected. She had always perceived herself as a single, brilliant, but ultimately separate, lonely thread. But the nun was undeniably, beautifully, terrifyingly correct. She was not merely the thread, she was the weaving itself. And so was everyone and everything else. A vast, humming, vibrating, infinitely complex and interconnected, living web of being, where every gentle pull, every action on one single thread sent a subtle, vibrating, resonant ripple through the entirety, the wholeness of the whole. She was both the weaver and the woven. That day, Akari's entire understanding of existence was rewoven at its very core, its foundation replaced. She began to perceive, to feel, that her very life was a gift sustained moment to moment by countless other beings, seen and unseen, past and present. The air that filled her lungs was a gift from the vast breathing forests and the trillions of tiny, invisible phytoplankton in the distant, rolling, salty seas. The water she drank had flowed in ancient, patient rivers, descended from gathering, pregnant clouds, and been part of primordial, slow-moving glaciers. The food she consumed was a gift from the living, generous earth, the sun, the rain, and the labor, the sweat, of innumerable, unknown, faceless farmers and transporters. Her every thought was shaped by a language she did not invent, by ideas she absorbed like a sponge from others, by a culture she did not construct alone. Her life was not a solo performance on a barren, empty stage. It was a constant, breathtaking, sacred, reciprocal conversation with the entire living, speaking cosmos. She was a note in a symphony, and the symphony was her. We have felt the flow of the river, listened to the voice of the stone, trusted the innate wisdom of the garden, and seen ourselves woven inextricably into the infinite tapestry of all life. Now, we approach perhaps the most subtle, the most profound, the most radical, and often the most misunderstood of all the great truths, the truth of emptiness, of shunyata. The word itself can sound ominous, cold, frightening to the untrained, unprepared ear. It whispers of absence, of void, of a nihilistic, existential nothingness that threatens to devour all meaning, purpose, and substance. But in the deep, radiant, luminous heart of Buddhist wisdom, shunyata, emptiness, is not a bleak final conclusion. It is a glorious and liberating commencement, a gateway. It is the ultimate truth that emancipates us from the narrow, confining prison of solidity, of fixed, concrete identity, of separation. It signifies that nothing in this entire shimmering manifest universe, no object, no person, no thought, no feeling, no emotion, no institution, possesses a permanent, independent, separate, unchanging, inherent self or solid existence. Everything is open, flowing, transient, contingent, and utterly, beautifully, wonderfully interdependent. Everything is a temporary, miraculous, fleeting confluence of causes and conditions, a shimmering, ephemeral, dancing pattern of energy and potential, arising and passing away in a vast, flowing, endless river of causality. To comprehend this not as an abstract intellectual philosophy, but as a living, breathing key that unlocks the door to the most profound peace and freedom, we must now visit the dusty, sacred, humble workshop of a master potter named Masaru. Masaru was an undisputed, celebrated master of his ancient, honorable craft. His hands, permanently stained with the clay he loved and revered, were instruments of grace, precision, and deep, intuitive knowledge. He could feel the very life, the history, in the earth, and he knew exactly how to coax, to invite it into forms of breathtaking, simple, essential beauty. His bowls, cups, and vases were sought after far and wide for their perfect, intuitive, living balance, their graceful, flowing, natural curves, their glazes that held depth and light within them like a still, deep, reflective pond at dawn. He was a creator in the fullest, proudest sense, and he took a quiet, justified, deep pride in the solid, tangible, weighty, real reality of his work, its there-ness. But as the years elapsed, marked by the turning of his wheel, a quiet, persistent, philosophical, gnawing question began to eat at the edges of his contentment, like water slowly, patiently wearing away stone. He would spend his days wedging, centering, pulling, and shaping the solid, pliable, responsive, obedient clay. He would fire it in the searing, alchemical, transformative heat of the kiln, transmuting the soft, vulnerable, mutable earth into something hard, permanent, enduring, and seemingly fixed. He would glaze it, adding layers of color and a luminous captured sheen. The finished bowl, to all his senses, to his touch, his sight, was the clay. It was the solid, material entity he could touch, see, weigh in his hand, and sell in the market. Its reality, its truth, was its form, its substance. Yet, when a patron came to his shop, drawn by his reputation for beauty, they did not first praise the quality of the clay or the technical perfection of the glaze, its chemistry. Driven by a deep spiritual urgent need for resolution, for truth, he took his finest, most sublime, most perfect bowl, a piece of ultimate simplicity, purity, and grace, and journeyed to a small, secluded, silent Zen temple, nestled in a whispering green bamboo forest. He found the abbot, an old monk whose eyes held the quiet, boundless, bottomless stillness of a deep, ancient mountain lake, reflecting everything and holding nothing. Without preamble, Masaru presented the bowl, this pinnacle of his life's work, and poured out his confusion, his existential, heartfelt dilemma. The monk accepted the bowl with the reverence, the gentleness. One shows a sacred object, a relic. He did not speak. He ran his fingers slowly, contemplatively, lovingly over its curves, feeling the subtle, almost imperceptible variations, the history, the love of its making. He held it up to the soft, diffused light filtering through the paper screens, observing how it passed through the translucent, thin rim, how the light loved the bowl. He tapped it gently with a fingernail and listened intently, with his whole being, to the clear, pure, ringing, singing sound it made, a note of beauty hanging in the quiet, sacred air. Finally, he placed it carefully, deliberately, on a low, bare table between them, the bowl now a third presence in the room. "Your work is exquisite, Masaru," the monk said, his voice as calm and settled and deep as the temple grounds themselves. "You are a true artist of form." The remote village of Mugenkyo, the Valley of Infinite Desire, was famous for its perfect acoustics. However, the villagers suffered under a strange, communal burden. Every sound they made, laughter, argument, the striking of a hammer, was followed by an incredibly long, slow, and distorted echo that only faded hours later. Because of this geological phenomenon, the villagers felt burdened by the past. Their current actions were always overshadowed by the lingering, messy sounds of what they had already done. The fear of the future echo led to silence, stagnation, and a general air of deep unsatisfactoriness, dukkha. They lived in a state of perpetual regret and anxiety. The village elder was Master Enso, a monk who had achieved profound inner peace. Enso's teaching was entirely focused on the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice, nibbana, the blowing out of the fires of greed, ill will, and delusion, resulting in the cessation of suffering. Enso taught that nibbana was not a place, but a state of perfect, silent equilibrium, where the echo of past actions no longer held power. Living in the village was a brilliant but highly agitated architect named Renji. Unrelated to the scholar in the earlier stories, Renji was obsessed with solving the village's acoustic problem. He believed that if he could just build a single perfect structure, a silent dome, he could absorb all the echoes and finally bring peace to Mugenkyo. Renji spent years measuring, calculating, and seeking the perfect material to defeat the sound. His life was consumed by the external problem, completely neglecting his own internal noise. One day, exhausted and defeated, Renji collapsed at the foot of the incomplete dome. he sought out Master Enso, whom he found sitting in the heart of the village, surrounded by the cacophony of lingering echoes. Enso was perfectly still, seemingly untouched by the noise. "Master Enso," Renji pleaded, "I cannot defeat the sound. The world will not be silent. I have dedicated my life to eliminating the echo. Yet the more I build, the louder the suffering becomes. How do I achieve the perfect final silence of my nibbana?" Enso smiled gently, completely ignoring the delayed, echoing complaint from a farmer nearby. "Renji, you seek nibbana outside of yourself, in a dome of perfectly sound-dampening material. But nibbana is not a place you build. It is a space you uncover. The silence you seek is not the absence of sound, but the absence of attachment to the sound." Enso gave Renji his challenge. "You will abandon the silent dome. For 1 week, you will enter the practice of the unstruck bell. Your goal is not to stop the echo, but to become the space in which the echo arises and dissolves, without generating any mental reaction or attachment. The practice of the unstruck bell." Enso explained the practice using the framework of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, showing how they lead to Nibbana. Samasati, right mindfulness. You will first find the quietest bell in the village and sit beside it. You will not strike the bell. You will only listen to the surrounding chaos. Your body must be still, and your mind must be fully present. Sama Samadhi, right concentration. When an echo arises, an old argument, a past mistake, or a future fear, do not follow it. Visualize your mind as the surface of the bell. The sound strikes it, but the perfect metal does not vibrate with attachment. The sound passes through it, and your mind immediately returns to the pure, silent potential of the unstruck bell. The path to Nibbana. The entire Eightfold Path is merely the method to cleanse the metal of the bell. Right speech ensures your words do not create new, harsh echoes. Right action ensures your deeds are clean. Right understanding knows that the echo is just dukkha, the suffering of clinging to the past. Renji began the practice. He sat by a beautiful, ancient bronze bell. The noise was indeed tremendous. The delayed, distorted arguments of the previous day, the lingering sounds of children's games, and the constant, abrasive scrape of the wind. His initial reaction was resistance. He tried to mentally shout over the noise, forcing silence. This only exhausted him. He remembered Enso's teaching. He focused on the stillness of his own breath. When an echo of his past failure, the cost of his incomplete dome, the mocking laughter of the villagers arose, he labeled it Old Echo, and immediately visualized the sound passing through the bronze bell without causing a vibration. He realized the profound truth. The sound was not the problem. His mental reaction to the sound was the problem. He was fighting the past, and that fight created suffering in the present. As his concentration deepened, a marvelous thing happened. The physical echoes did not cease, but they began to sound different. They became mere phenomena, vibrations in the air, devoid of emotional content. He stopped hearing my failure or their argument, and started hearing only vibrations. The world did not become silent, but Renji's internal world achieved a silence more profound than any sound-dampening material could provide. He found the unstruck bell of his own awareness. After 3 days, he was completely at ease in the chaos. He realized that the silence he craved had always been present, waiting to be uncovered beneath the noise of his own expectations. The architect's error. Renji returned to Master Enso, radiating calm. "Master," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I no longer fight the echo." I realized the suffering was not in the lingering sound, but in my clinging to the sound and demanding that the world be otherwise. The bell is always silent. Only the surface vibrates. You have seen the truth of anatta, no self, applied to the moment, Renji, Enso affirmed. You realize that the self is not the echo. The self is the awareness of the echo. Now, Enso said, pointing to the incomplete silent dome, you must return to your architecture. You failed because you tried to build nibbana out of stone and material. You must now find a way to apply the unstruck bell to the external world. Enso gave Renji the final essential lesson of nibbana. Nibbana is not a selfish silence. The cessation of suffering in one being must contribute to the cessation of suffering in all beings. Your final act of architecture must be to build a structure that does not eliminate the sound, but one that transforms the echo into a perfect, harmonious reflection of the present moment. Your work is not to silence the world, but to help the world hear the truth of its own actions clearly and immediately, without distortion or delay. Renji stood before Master Enso, no longer viewing the world as a problem to be solved, but as a condition to be understood. He realized that the village's suffering was a perfect, externalized metaphor for samsara, the cycle of suffering where past deeds, the initial sound, return as delayed, distorted consequences, the long, messy echo. Master, Renji said, my previous dome was based on greed, raga, the desire for a silent, perfect future. Now I see that nibbana is not the elimination of the echo, but the purification and immediate return of the echo. If the consequence of our action is immediate and clear, we are forced to live in right action. Renji returned to the incomplete silent dome. He began dismantling the sound-dampening materials, which he now saw as a form of delusion, moha, an attempt to ignore the consequences of one's own actions. He developed a new design based on the principle of the unstruck bell, a complex, geometrically perfect array of resonators. He used highly polished granite and precise angles to create a structure that would not absorb sound, but instantly catch the sound and return it to the speaker with zero delay and zero distortion. His goal was to close the gap between the moment of the cause and the moment of the effect. He worked for months, his mind entirely focused, his actions embodying Samma Kamanta, right action, and Samma Vayama, right effort. He was no longer motivated by fear of the echo, but by the desire to create a perfect mirror of the Dharma. When the structure was finally complete, it stood in the center of the valley, a masterpiece of acoustic truth. It was not silent, it was instantaneous. The villagers gathered for the test. An old woman, filled with lingering anxiety, made a sudden, sharp, anxious sound, a quick, nervous cough. The sound bounced off the resonators and returned to her ear instantly and purely. The immediacy of the clean, sharp sound shocked her. She realized the harshness of the sound was entirely her own creation. A few moments later, a young farmer, still filled with ill will, dosa, from a disagreement earlier that day, shouted a short, angry word at a friend. The word returned to him instantly, loud and perfectly clear, without any distortion. The consequence of his anger was immediate and undeniable. He heard the full, clean impact of his own harshness in the present moment. He physically winced, not from the volume, but from the sudden, unmediated truth of his own destructive voice. The villagers quickly learned that they could not escape the return of their own sound. The structure forced them into a state of continuous samma sati, right mindfulness. If they created a rough, impure sound, the consequence was immediate discomfort. If they spoke with samavaka, right speech, words that were kind and beneficial, the return was a clear, harmonious resonance that uplifted them. The great, lingering, chaotic echo of the village ceased. The physical echo did not cease, but the gap in time disappeared. The sound and the reflection were simultaneous. This immediacy of consequence forced the villagers' minds to let go of the past and the future. Renji understood the final truth. Nibbana is not achieved by eliminating the echo of action, karma, but by eliminating the delay of consequence. When cause and effect are simultaneous, the mind is forced to live in the perfect present, where all suffering, the fear of the future consequence, dissolves. Master Enso stood with Renji outside the array, watching the villagers speak and listen. "The fire has been blown out, Renji," Enso whispered. "The fires of greed, ill will, and delusion are fueled by the gap between action and consequence. Your structure eliminated the gap, forcing the villagers to see the truth of their own minds reflected instantly in the world. You did not build the silent dome. You built the perfect echo of the Dharma. This structure is a physical, external representation of the Buddha's path. It does not change the world, but it perfectly mirrors the truth of the world, leading to the cessation of suffering." Renji no longer felt the need to build or change anything. He had found his ultimate peace not in the completion of his architecture, but in the perfect clarity of understanding. He had achieved Nibbana not by becoming silent, but by creating a space where the truth could no longer be ignored. He was the architect who finally understood that the most perfect form is the unconditioned silence of the mind. The city of Aikyushi, the city of eternity, was carved entirely from grey, impenetrable granite. Its architects and residents believed that the only way to achieve peace was to defeat time. Everything was built to last. Statues were massive, walls were impossibly thick, and even their written laws were etched permanently onto metal plaques. Their central delusion was the belief in permanence, Sasataditi. In this city of stone lived a young, intensely dedicated sculptor named Kenzo. Kenzo was obsessed with creating a statue that would withstand 1,000 years of wind and rain. He worked on a colossal granite Buddha, perfecting every fold of the robe and the subtle curve of the smile, pouring his entire existence into the creation of something eternal. He believed that the ultimate value lay in durability and immutability. Kenzo's older brother, Hiroshi, was the complete opposite. Hiroshi was a wandering, renowned sand mandala artist. Every year, Hiroshi would visit Aikyushi for the annual festival, and over 3 days, he would painstakingly create a magnificent, intricate mandala using millions of grains of colored sand and tiny funnels. The moment the mandala was finished, Hiroshi would ritualistically sweep it away, allowing the wind to scatter the sand into the bay. The city regarded Hiroshi's art as a pointless, fleeting folly. Kenzo viewed his brother with pity. "Hiroshi," he declared one evening, standing next to his vast, unchanging granite Buddha, "your skill is wasted. You create masterpieces only to destroy them. My work will stand forever, a testament to enduring truth. Your work is swallowed by time. You embrace loss." Hiroshi gently tapped the granite. "And you, Kenzo, embrace the illusion of stopping the river. My art of the sand mandala is not an embrace of loss. It is an embrace of anicca, impermanence. Your suffering lies in demanding stillness from life, which is movement." Kenzo countered, "But if nothing lasts, Hiroshi, then what is the point of effort? Why bother creating beauty if it must instantly pass? The point of effort, Hiroshi replied, is the perfection of the moment, not the preservation of the result. When you cling to the result, the joy of the effort is lost. When you cling to permanence, you make an enemy of the wind, the water, and time itself. Hiroshi gave Kenzo a challenge. For 1 week, you will leave your granite statue and join me. You will perform the practice of the dissolving form. The practice of the dissolving form. Hiroshi led Kenzo to a small enclosed courtyard near the bay. He handed Kenzo a thin bamboo funnel and a tray of fine crimson sand. Your first task is simple, Kenzo, Hiroshi instructed. You will use this sand to replicate a single, perfect fold from the robe of your granite Buddha. You will focus your entire masterful skill on its creation. But the moment you finish it, you must instantly sweep it away and start again. You must repeat this creation and dissolution 50 times before you sleep. Kenzo began the task with immense frustration. His sculptor's hand, used to the slow, deliberate work of chiseling stone, struggled with the fluidity of the sand. He spent an hour creating the first meticulous fold. It was perfect, a beautiful, temporary ripple of crimson. The thought arose, hold it, look at its perfection, take a moment to appreciate this enduring beauty. But Hiroshi stood silently, waiting. Kenzo sighed in frustration and swept the sand flat with a small brush. The perfect fold was gone, leaving only blankness. A deep, agonizing pain of loss hit him, far stronger than the pain of losing a completed granite statue would have been. He realized the absurdity. The pain was generated not by the destruction, but by his clinging to the few seconds of its finished form. The effort was immense, the result was fleeting, and the ego demanded permanence as compensation for the skill expended. He repeated the practice. The next few folds were rushed, messy, and executed in anger. Since it will be destroyed, why bother with the effort? Kenzo, Hiroshi said softly, watching him. The question is not why bother creating it if it will disappear. The question is, what quality of attention do you bring to the act of creation, knowing it will disappear? Does its impermanence degrade your effort, or does its fleeting nature demand more perfection in the moment? Kenzo paused. He realized that the stone demanded perfection because it was permanent. The sand demanded perfection despite being impermanent. The sand demanded that the act itself be the entire value. He slowed down. He focused solely on the crimson grains flowing through the funnel, his mind completely absorbed in the present movement. He created the 10th fold. It was flawless. The moment he finished it, he paused for one breath, fully registered its beauty, and swept it away without internal resistance. The pain of loss was gone, replaced by a quiet satisfaction in the purity of the effort. This practice taught Kenzo the first lesson of Anicca. Value is found in the verb, creating being, not in the noun, the finished object. The practice of the melting ice. The next day, Hiroshi gave Kenzo a massive block of clear, pristine river ice. This is your canvas today, Kenzo. You will use a delicate sculpting tool to carve a miniature replica of your granite Buddha. But you must do this work in the warmest corner of the courtyard, under the midday sun. Your art is now a race against time and heat. The practice of the melting ice was a profound lesson in clinging and urgency. Kenzo started carving with a frenzy, attempting to outrun the inevitable. His hands trembled, his cuts were crude, and his fear of the object's destruction made the work sloppy and tense. You are forcing the river again, Kenzo, Hiroshi warned. Your fear of melting is what melts your focus. If the ice melts, it is merely changing form, It is returning to its nature. Your goal is not to preserve the ice. Your goal is to perfectly express the Buddha's form in the time you are given. Kenzo took a deep breath. He stopped fighting the heat. He accepted the fact that the statue would inevitably become water. He began to carve with precise, steady strokes. He saw the form emerge from the ice, even as he saw the water droplets slide down the finished surfaces. The ice was simultaneously existing and disappearing. He reached a state of intense, mindful concentration. The sculpture was beautiful, translucent, and perfect, even though one side was already dissolving into a puddle at his feet. The beauty was enhanced, not diminished, by the knowledge of its imminent end. When he finished the last fold of the tiny robe, only the core shape remained. He stepped back and watched as the midday sun hit the ice. In less than a minute, the entire statue collapsed into a pool of water. This time, Kenzo felt no sorrow. He felt only a deep sense of completion. The work was done. The goal was fulfilled. The form had changed, but the perfection of the effort remained in his mind. He realized that his granite Buddha, though solid, was already melting in the vast, slow heat of geological time. His ice Buddha taught him more about eternal truth than 1,000 years of stone could. He returned to Hiroshi, his hands wet, but his mind clear. He carried the heavy burden of the city's delusion, the delusion of permanence, and was ready to face the final, most profound lesson. Kenzo's mind, once rigid as granite, had become fluid as melting ice. He understood that the perfection of the form was fleeting, but the perfection of the creation was permanent. He returned to Hiroshi, ready for the final, most profound lesson. The day of the annual festival arrived. The entire city of Eikyushi, clad in their heavy, enduring robes, gathered to witness Hiroshi's annual folly. The central square was swept clean for the creation of the Grand Mandala. Hiroshi announced, "This year, the mandala will be created by Kenzo, the master sculptor of permanence. His subject will be the river of time itself." Kenzo approached the massive square, carrying his bamboo funnel and the colored sand. He started working with a singular focus he had never achieved with his stone Buddha. He wasn't fighting the material, he was dancing with it. He began by creating a vibrant central sun, representing the present moment, surrounded by spirals of receding past, fading colors, and approaching future, vivid yet unfinished colors. The work required total commitment, as the slightest tremor or moment of doubt would ruin the delicate, fragile lines of sand. For 3 days, Kenzo worked tirelessly. He ate only the simplest food and slept only a few hours. He was wholly absorbed in the creation, realizing that his ultimate goal was not the finished product, but the unbroken flow of mindfulness during the 3 days. The moment he finished the last grain of sand, a perfect, shimmering ripple of gold on the edge of the central sun, the mandala achieved a breathtaking, impossible beauty. It was a masterpiece of intentional impermanence. It was the most beautiful thing Kenzo had ever created, precisely because it was made of sand, poised on the brink of dissolution. The crowd gasped. They saw the whole of their life, the struggle for permanence in the face of constant change, reflected in the shimmering design. Kenzo, however, felt no joy of possession. He felt a deep, pure sense of completion. The work was finished. His promise to the effort had been fulfilled. Master Hiroshi approached Kenzo, his eyes shining with pride. "It is magnificent, my brother. The perfection is in the truth it reveals." "It is only sand, Hiroshi," Kenzo replied, his voice calm and light. "The moment I finished it, the value passed from the object to my mind. It is already gone, "Then you are ready," Hiroshi said. Hiroshi handed Kenzo a simple, polished bronze bowl and instructed him to perform the final ritual, the dissolution. Kenzo knelt before the mandala. He took the smooth edge of the bowl and plunged it into the central sun, sweeping the intricate patterns into a single, meaningless pile of mixed, dull-colored sand. Dukkha, the friction between what is and what should be, was instantly gone. He did not hesitate. He did not feel loss. He felt liberation. The destruction of the external form freed the internal truth. The crowd murmured in shock and sorrow, feeling the sharp, familiar pang of clinging and loss that Kenzo had transcended. Hiroshi led Kenzo to the edge of the granite city, overlooking the vast open bay. "The granite city," Hiroshi said, pointing to the immovable statues, "is a monument to Sasatadithi, the delusion of permanence. It is beautiful, but it is a self-imposed prison. Your mandala is the truth. Now, release the truth back to the world." Kenzo poured the pile of mixed, dull sand into the wind. The wind instantly caught the fine grains and scattered them over the bay. The colored sand settled onto the water, briefly painting the surface before being completely swallowed by the vast, ceaseless current of the ocean. Kenzo watched until the very last grain disappeared. He realized the sand was not destroyed, it was transformed. It was now part of the water, the wind, and the bay. It had simply changed form, exactly like the ice. "Where is the mandala now, Kenzo?" Hiroshi asked. "It is everywhere, Hiroshi," Kenzo replied, tears of clarity running down his cheeks. "Its form is gone, but its essence is in the wind, the water, and most importantly, in the mind of the one who created it. It is no longer a static object to be guarded. It is a dynamic, living memory that cannot be taken away." Hiroshi placed his hand on the granite wall of the city. "Go back to your granite Buddha, Kenzo. Finish it. But when you strike the chisel, remember the sand. Remember that the ultimate purpose of the finished form is not to endure, but to serve as a perfect vehicle for the moment of its creation." Kenzo returned to his workshop. He picked up his chisel, but his work was completely different. He no longer struck the granite with the tense, desperate energy of one fighting time. He struck it with the mindful, fluid precision of one who knows the final form is merely the beginning of the next change. He finished the colossal Buddha. It was a masterpiece of eternal form, but Kenzo no longer cared if it lasted 1,000 years or a single day. The true masterpiece was not the statue, but the mind of the sculptor. A mind that had finally embraced the truth of Anika and found freedom in the ceaseless flow of the river of time. The wasteland of solitude. The ancient highlands were dominated by the ruins of a once great city, Atsukyo, the city of self-sufficiency. The city was destroyed not by war, but by solitude. Its architects believed that true perfection could only be achieved through complete independence. Structures that stood alone, independent of supporting walls or other buildings. The result was a city of isolated, fragile towers that eventually collapsed on themselves. Living near the ruins was an aging, solitary seeker named Masaru. Masaru had spent his entire life dedicated to achieving personal enlightenment. He had mastered shamatha, calm, and vipassana, insight. He had achieved a profound understanding of shunyata, emptiness, and the true nature of the Tathagata, awakened mind. He believed his Buddha nature was his sole, ultimate refuge. He sought to live entirely by the wisdom of his awakened mind, refusing any aid, counsel, or connection with others. He had taken only the first of the three refugees, the Buddha, to the exclusion of the others. The three jewels, Triratna. Buddha, the refuge of the awakened mind, wisdom. Dharma, the refuge of the teaching law, truth and method. Sangha, the refuge of the community, interdependence and compassion. One day, a massive landslide, triggered by seasonal rains, began to threaten the entire valley, including the last remaining fragment of the ruins. The damage was immediate and devastating. Masaru was trapped inside a ruined structure, his leg pinned beneath a heavy, fallen beam. His personal wisdom, the Buddha refuge, was immediately tested. He tried to apply samatha to the pain, but the fear was too intense. He tried to apply vipassana to the beam, seeing it as anatta, empty of self. But the conventional reality of its weight was overwhelmingly real, samvrti satya. His individual wisdom, perfect in solitude, was useless against the crushing weight of the physical world. "My wisdom is useless," he cried out in despair. "My mind is awakened, but my body is failing. I have the Buddha nature, but I am lacking the tool to survive." Just outside the valley, a renowned master architect named Riko arrived. Riko had come not to study the ruins, but to rebuild a sustainable settlement nearby. Riko understood the full scope of the three refugees as architectural principles. Buddha, wisdom. The clarity of the blueprint, right understanding. Dharma, law. The materials and methods, right action path. Sangha, community. The interlocking foundation, interdependence, support. Riko heard Masaru's cries. She found him trapped and knew she had only minutes before the remaining structure completely collapsed. "Masaru," Riko shouted, her voice calm amidst the shifting earth. "Do not rely solely on your mind. Your Buddha, wisdom, is perfect, but wisdom alone cannot lift the beam." Masaru, desperate, called back, "Then what is my refuge? What is the ultimate truth if my mind cannot save my body?" Riko paused, assessing the situation. She couldn't lift the beam herself, and there was no time to call for help. "Your refuge is the Dharma, Masaru, the law of the tool. Tell me what materials you have inside with you." Masaru looked around. He saw only dust, broken clay tiles, and fragments of shattered wooden scaffolding, all symbols of anicca, impermanence. "I have only fragments, Master. Nothing is whole, nothing is fixed." Riko shouted instructions. "Find the thickest shard of wood, Masaru, and find 3 flat stones." Masaru, using his residual calm, samatha, managed to crawl and gather the requested objects. 1 thick piece of wood and 3 flat stones. The application of the law. Riko shouted, guiding Masaru through the principle of Dharma, the law of physics, right method. "Take the wood. That is your lever, the embodiment of skillful means, upaya. Place 1 of your flat stones beneath the beam, near your leg. That is your fulcrum, the principle of interdependence." Masaru did so, his arm trembling. "Now, put the tip of the wood beneath the beam and rest the lever on the fulcrum. Now, push down. Use the law of the lever to transform your small force into a large force." Masaru pushed. The beam groaned, but didn't move enough. "I cannot move it. My effort, virya, is not enough," Masaru cried. Riko replied, "Your effort is perfect, but the Dharma requires sustained action. The law of the lever is insufficient without the law of Sangha, community." "But there is no one else here," Masaru protested. "My refuge is broken." Riko gave him the final instruction, uniting the 3 jewels. Masaru cried out desperately that his individual strength was insufficient and that there was no one else present. He felt his Sangha refuge in interdependence, was broken. Riko, the architect, shouted back, unifying the 3 principles. The refuge in Sangha is not only other people, it is the refuge in the law of interdependence. Those 3 flat stones you hold, Masaru, are your Sangha. They must work together. You must do what you could not do alone. Your Buddha, awakened mind, gave you wisdom. You know the beam has no fixed self, anatta, and therefore can be moved. Your Dharma, the law of the lever, gave you method, and your Sangha, the stones, will give you sustained support. Masaru understood. He realized he shouldn't just push the lever once. He had to use his 3 stones to incrementally lift the beam, replacing his single, failing force with the power of the interaction of objects. He pushed the lever with all his might, virya. The beam groaned and lifted just 1 centimeter. He quickly, before the beam settled, inserted his first flat stone beneath the edge of the beam. This was the first member of his Sangha, refuge in a firm but temporary support. He reset the fulcrum of the lever and repeated the action, now resting the lever on the first stone. The beam lifted higher, allowing him to insert the second flat stone. He repeated this a 3rd time, using all 3 stones. Through the sequential, interdependent act he had created out of nothing, Masaru was able to lift the beam high enough to pull his leg out. He was free. Wisdom, method, and support Masaru crawled out of the wreckage, and Riko helped him descend to safety. When they were clear, Masaru collapsed, shaking. I spent my life seeking the Buddha in my mind for a single, perfect truth, Masaru said. But my wisdom couldn't lift the beam. It was the stones and the plank that saved me. Riko, looking calmly at the ruins, replied, "Wisdom without method is useless insight. Method without support is a single failing push. Salvation does not come from one truth. It comes from their complete unity." She explained, "Buddha, awakened mind, your wisdom gave you the knowledge that the beam has no fixed identity and can be moved, paramartha satya. This gave you the intention. Dharma, the law of the lever, your knowledge of physics gave you the method, the principle that allowed your small force to act effectively, samvrti satya. Sangha, the stones. The stones and your ability to use them incrementally gave you the support and continuity of the action. Your personal wisdom, Buddha, was only the first stone," Riko concluded. "If you had failed to use the Dharma and the Sangha, you would have dropped the beam and been crushed. The true refuge is not what you know, but how you act in total cooperation with reality." Building the new city Masaru, having healed, did not return to his solitary search. He joined Riko. He became the architect of the 3 refugees in his life and in the life of the new settlement they began to build. He no longer sought a single independent truth. He understood that enlightenment was not a lonely tower standing apart from the world, but an interwoven, supportive system. Every settlement decision began with the Buddha's wisdom, right understanding and right intention. It then proceeded to the Dharma's law, right speech, right action, right livelihood, the practical, ethical method. And finally, it relied on the Sangha, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, the collective, interdependent, and sustained effort of the community. The new homes built by Riko and Masaru were strong because their structures were not isolated. They were interdependent, each wall supporting the next. Masaru, the solitary seeker, found his true, unshakable refuge not in his own mind alone, but in the unity of his mind, the law of reality, and the continuous support of all phenomena. The Valley of Aspiration, the monastery of Gamboji, the Temple of Aspiration, was nestled in a vast, fertile valley. its monks were dedicated to the concept of Tathagata, the thus gone one, believing that the ultimate reality, Tathata, suchness or thusness, was a transcendent, perfect state achieved only after years of rigorous practice. They lived in a state of perpetual striving, always looking ahead to the moment of final realization. The monastery's most revered master was a scholar named Zenshin, who taught that the journey to suchness required mapping out every imperfection and eliminating it. He believed that the unconditioned truth, Tathata, was hidden beneath the layers of the conditioned world. The monastery's youngest and most confused monk was named Kai. Kai was assigned to the monastery garden, a space Zenshin considered messy, unpredictable, and a constant distraction from the purity of study. Kai poured immense effort into the garden, striving to make it perfect, manicuring every bush and removing every weed. But the garden, subject to anicca, impermanence, never stayed perfect, and Kai lived in a state of continuous dukkha, frustration. Kai sought out Master Zenshin, clutching a handful of weeds he had just pulled. "Master," Kai confessed, "I seek Tathata, suchness, the perfect, unconditioned state. I apply all my effort to the garden, but every morning the weeds return. The imperfection is relentless. How can I ever find the thus gone state when the world I live in is perpetually thus come, messy, flawed, and demanding effort? When will the striving end and the perfect reality begin?" Zenshin sighed, recognizing the familiar struggle. "You mistake the destination for the reality, Kai. You believe Tathata is a place of perfection you must travel to, but the thus gone is not a journey away from this moment. It is a profound realization of this moment. The ultimate reality is not hidden beneath the weeds. It is the suchness of the weed itself, the perfect, unconditioned reality of its momentary existence." Zenshin gave Kai his final challenge. "You will perform the practice of the perfect imperfection. You will no longer strive for a perfect garden. You must use the weeds and the decay to reveal the truth of Tathata." The practice of the perfect imperfection. Zenshin instructed Kai to stop weeding the garden entirely. His task was to practice the ultimate form of right understanding, samadhi, to see the unconditioned truth in the heart of the conditioned world. Stop resisting, samatha. You will first establish complete shamatha, calm abiding. Allow the garden to become messy, chaotic, and overgrown. Do not resist the sight, the smell, or the feeling of the disorder. Let the state of suchness simply be. Observe without name, vipassana. You must then observe the garden with pure vipassana, insight. Look at the weeds, the dying leaves, and the unpruned branches. Do not name them weed, death, or disorder. See them merely as momentary events, raw phenomena devoid of conceptual labels. Recognize the unconditioned, tathata. When you see the unpruned branch without labeling it imperfect, you will realize that its imperfection is merely a concept. Without the concept, the branch is revealed in its suchness, the perfect, unconditioned reality of its present state. Kai reluctantly began the practice. The garden quickly became a tangled mess. His mind screamed with aversion, judging the garden's failure. This was the suffering, dukkha, caused by his clinging to the conventional idea of perfection. He sat, fighting his impulse to grab the shears. He established his samatha, a calm base of awareness. Then he used his vipassana to look at the worst offender, a large, tenacious thistle growing aggressively between his rows of perfect flowers. He mentally stripped away the label weed. He saw only the sharp green points, the the texture of the stem, the way the sunlight caught the purple flower. In that moment of pure, non-conceptual observation, the thistle was revealed in its tathata, its absolute suchness. It was not good or bad. It was simply this. Its purpose, its growth, and its struggle were the perfect, unconditioned reality of that moment. Kai realized that the Tathagata, the goal, was not a perfect being who had gone elsewhere, but a state of consciousness that had simply gone thus, that saw the world thus, as it is. The Garden of Interdependence. Kai continued the practice for days. He noticed something else profound. The weeds, when seen without the label of weed, were not isolated problems. The thistle was protecting the soil from erosion. The fallen, dying leaves were feeding the roots of the flowers he cherished. He realized that the conventional world was defined by a constant, chaotic, and beautiful interdependence. The perfection of the flowers was entirely dependent on the imperfection of the decay. The ultimate truth, tathata, was not a pure static state. It was the total, unconditioned reality of the whole, messy, interdependent system. This insight freed him from the tyranny of control. He stopped striving for a perfect garden and started simply participating in the flow of the garden's suchness. He still performed actions. He pruned a branch here, redirected water there. But the action was no longer driven by the goal of perfection. It was driven by the spontaneous, skillful response to the present need. He looked at the garden not as a project, but as a mirror of his own unconditioned mind, a space where everything was messy, changing, and utterly perfect in its present state. The unconditional act. Kai returned to Master Zenshin, not with a harvest of perfect fruit, but with the unpruned, chaotic truth of the garden itself. He was no longer the conflicted seeker. He was the thus come, a being present in the ultimate reality of the current moment. He found Master Zenshin and the senior monks in a state of crisis. They were meticulously preparing for a rare sacred ritual that required a specific, perfectly sized piece of sandalwood, a wood renowned for its fixed scent and enduring quality. The problem was that the last piece of suitable sandalwood had been damaged. It had been chewed by a small forest beetle. The damage was conventionally minor, but to Master Zenshin, who sought absolute perfection, the wood was unusable. He saw the damage as a metaphor for the imperfection of the conditioned world. "We must postpone the ritual," Zenshin declared, his face etched with frustration. "Dukkha. The wood is flawed. It is not tathata. It is not the perfect, unconditioned reality we require." Kai stepped forward, holding a piece of dried thistle from his garden. "Master, the wood is tathata in its present state. It is the perfect, unconditioned reality of damaged sandalwood." Kai explained, "You seek a state of perfection that has gone thus, Tathagata, which means you refuse to see the perfection of the state that has come thus, this moment. The beetle's chewing, the wood's reaction, the dust it created, this is all the total, unconditioned reality of this moment. The flaw is not a contradiction of the truth. The flaw is part of the truth itself." He then demonstrated the unification of the two truths, the conventional need for perfection and the ultimate reality of imperfection. Using his understanding of skillful means, upaya, Kai took a piece of the beetle-damaged sandalwood. He did not try to carve away the damage. Instead, he took the perfect form of the beetle's bite, the precise shape and curve of the damage, and used a fine tool to etch the identical pattern onto the opposite side of the wood. By deliberately replicating the damage, he transformed the flaw from an accident into a design element. The The wood was no longer imperfect. It was an object that perfectly represented the interdependence of natural imperfection and human intention. The damage is still there, conventional truth, Kai explained. But now it is seen as part of the whole design, ultimate truth. Perfection is not the removal of the conditioned. It is the acceptance of the totality of the conditioned. Zenshin looked at the wood. His mind, trained for decades to reject the flaw, experienced a cognitive shift. The acceptance of the flaw was suddenly effortless. The ritual was saved, not by finding a perfect piece of wood, but by finding the perfection in the flawed piece. But his actions were no longer driven by the pain of seeking perfection. They were driven by the spontaneous, joyful recognition of the suchness of the branch in his hand, the soil beneath his feet, and the flow of anicca that governed them all. He had become the Tathagata, the one who simply is thus, in the messy, beautiful reality of his own garden. The search for the golden thread. The ancient village of Shogunmura, the village of adornment, was known for its magnificent weavers, but none was more dedicated than the master weaver, Tenrai, whose name meant heavenly thunder. Tenrai was not content weaving ordinary silk. He was obsessed with finding and weaving the golden thread, a legendary luminous fiber believed to represent the pure, unconditioned light of the Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature. Tenrai believed that true enlightenment could only be found in the sacred and the sublime. He built a pristine, elevated workshop, Kiyomizu-do, the pure water hall, where he practiced rigorous meditation, dhyana, and used only the finest, purest silk. His life was divided into two rigid states: the sacred, moments of deep meditation, and weaving the pure, beautiful, but ultimately unattainable golden thread. In these moments, he felt immense spiritual bliss. The mundane, the messy, tedious work of washing the dirty, ordinary wool, repairing his old, faulty loom, and dealing with the rough, common fibers. In these moments, his spiritual bliss instantly vanished, replaced by irritation, dvesa. Tenrai understood intellectually that the Buddha nature was present everywhere, even in the mundane. Yet he could never experience it while scrubbing grease from a cloth. His greatest frustration was that the golden thread seemed to exist only in the Kiyomizu-do. The moment he stepped outside, it disappeared. He sought the counsel of his old master, a woman named Oku, whose name meant deep inner place. Oku lived in a simple hut and spent her days repairing old, worn-out kimonos with the roughest, most common thread. "Master Oku," Tenrai pleaded, presenting a shimmering piece of his pure but incomplete weaving. "I find the Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, when I am in the sacred stillness. I can see the golden thread, but the moment I touch the rough, dirty cloth of ordinary life, the cleaning, the chores, the weariness, the light vanishes. How can I maintain the intrinsic purity of the sacred while immersed in the unavoidable mundane?" Oku picked up a piece of ordinary stained cotton from her pile and began mending a tear. "Tenrai, you are making the fundamental mistake of dualism. You believe the golden thread is a separate, special object you must weave into the ordinary cloth. But the ultimate truth is that the ordinary cloth is the golden thread itself. The Tathagata Garbha is not something to be added to your life. It is the intrinsic, unconditioned purity that is already present in your messy life. The dirt on the fabric is temporary. The essence of the fiber is always pure." Master Oku gave Tenrai his final challenge. "You will discard your pursuit of the separate golden thread. You will perform the practice of the intrinsic cloth. You must return to your workshop and for 1 week, engage only in the 3 most irritating, mundane chores you despise. The chores you believe destroy your spirituality. You must use the Dharma to prove that the Buddha nature is not absent from the mundane, but that the mundane is the Buddha nature. The practice of the intrinsic cloth Tenrai returned to the hallway of transition, where the chaotic tools of his ordinary life lay waiting. He chose 3 tasks he hated: washing the grimy silk, the arduous scrubbing of silk stained with dye and oil; repairing the broken loom, the tedious, frustrating work of fixing a complex, faulty machine; sweeping the greasy floor, the repetitive, seemingly endless effort to clear the dust and grime from the workshop floor. Tenrai dedicated his first day to washing the grimy silk. His old irritation immediately surfaced. "This is not a spiritual task," his mind screamed. "This is blocking my vision of the golden thread." He fought the irritation using sheer sheller, discipline, forcing himself to scrub. But the more he struggled against the dirt, the more the dirt seemed to represent his own spiritual impurity. His dualism, sacred versus mundane, was reinforced by the effort. Master Oku, passing by, offered a quiet instruction. "The goal is not to remove the dirt with effort, Tenrai. The goal is to see the Buddha nature within the dirt." Where is the dirt coming from? The dirt is also a temporary conditioned phenomenon, anicca. It is empty of inherent existence, shunyata. Stop resisting the dirt. Simply be with the purity of the fiber that remains untouched. Tenrai understood. He stopped fighting the dirt and began to focus his dhyana, concentration, on the fiber itself, the unconditioned thread that remained pure beneath the superficial stain. The washing stopped being a struggle and became a meditation on the inherent purity of the cloth. The broken loom, the nature of samsara. On the second day, Tenrai turned to his second despised chore, repairing the broken loom. The loom was a complex, frustrating machine, always losing synchronization, symbolic of the cyclic, faulty, and suffering-prone nature of samsara, the world of conditioned existence. His initial thought was to use his prajna, wisdom, to analyze the emptiness of the loom, to realize that the machine, being composed of parts, had no inherent self, anatta. He began to repair a delicate gear, but his frustration mounted. The more he forced the gear, the more it resisted. His spiritual bliss was gone, replaced by the mundane annoyance of the faulty mechanism. He realized the problem. He was trying to use the wisdom of anatta, no self, to destroy the loom's fixed identity, hoping it would vanish and let him return to the pristine vision of the golden thread. Master Oku, passing by with a basket of rough threads, saw his struggle. "Tenrai, you understand that the brokenness is temporary, but you do not understand that the faultiness is the teaching. You must use karuna, compassion, for the broken loom. The Buddha nature is not just the potential for perfection. It is the unconditioned capacity to function perfectly, even when flawed. The loom is a perfect teaching of dependent origination. It only functions because of the precise combination of flawed parts. Do not hate the brokenness. Love the potential for function that remains, despite the brokenness." Tenrai shifted his focus. He stopped seeing the loom as a frustrating machine and saw it as a suffering being. He approached the gear with metta, loving kindness, accepting its resistance. As he worked with non-clinging, focused compassion, the repair became effortless. He realized that the inherent design of the loom, its underlying blueprint for perfect function, was the Buddha nature residing within the manifestation of samsara. He had found the golden thread not by escaping the brokenness, but by applying compassionate skill, upaya, to the brokenness itself. The greasy floor, the non-duality of purity. On the third day, Tenrai faced the final, most mundane task, sweeping the greasy floor. The floor was perpetually dusty, covered in sticky dye and oil, a perfect metaphor for the defilements, klesha, that obscure the mind. He began sweeping, but the dust and oil clung to the broom. He was disgusted by the grime, feeling his hard-won spiritual clarity slip away. He knew intellectually that the defilements were empty, shunyata, and only temporary, anicca, but the visceral experience of the filth dragged him down. He stopped and looked at the broom. Where is the Buddha nature in this greasy dust? Master Oku entered and began sweeping an area near him. She swept with a strange, boundless joy, mudita. Her action was fluid, perfect, and completely unbothered by the grime. Tenrai, Oku said, not stopping her sweeping. You seek the purity of the result, the clean floor, and you hate the impurity of the process, the dust. You make purity and impurity dualities. The Tathagata Garbha means that the dust is the Buddha nature. The dust is made of the same unconditioned primal elements as the silk and the light. The defilement is only a label placed upon the configuration of empty elements. The floor is already pure. The illusion of dirt is merely a temporary configuration of energy. Tenrai let go of the rigid label of filth. He saw the dust and the grease not as spiritual enemies, but as a dynamic, flowing mass of temporary elements. He saw his broom, his arm, the dust, and the floor, all as one seamless, empty expression of the universe. As he swept with this insight, the sweeping became not a chore, but an unending, joyful flow of energy. The dirt was no longer dirty. It was simply matter moving from one place to another, a perfect teaching of impermanence. The intrinsic golden thread. When the day was done, Tenrai walked back into the pristine Kiyomizu-do, the pure water hall. He did not feel the sudden rush of sacred bliss he used to feel. Instead, he felt a stable, deep, unconditioned peace that transcended the environment. He realized the profound truth. The golden thread was not a special fiber to be added to the tapestry of life. The golden thread was the intrinsic essence of the ordinary thread itself. It was the pure, unconditioned capacity of the mundane to exist. He took his place at the loom and began to weave an ordinary rough wool cloth. He did not seek the golden thread, but as he worked, the washing, the fixing, and the sweeping became seamlessly integrated into his weaving. His hands, having mastered the mundane, moved with an effortless perfection. The rough wool cloth, because it was woven with the awareness of inherent purity in every mundane task, glowed with a subtle, radiant light. The cloth was not pure silk, it was pure Buddha nature. Tenrai, now the master of Kompon no Ori, the loom of the root, intrinsic, never again separated his life into the sacred and the mundane. He taught that enlightenment is not the accumulation of sacred moments, but the full, non-dual embrace of every ordinary moment as intrinsically perfect. His teaching was the simple act of showing his students how to mend an old kimono, saying, "Find the Tathagata Garbha not in the perfect center, but in the frayed edge." When the girl woke at dawn, the bell was whole again, glowing softly. She pressed her palms together and bowed. The bell rang once, clear, endless, a sound made of one small heartbeat and 500 years of waiting. The girl grew up to become the temple's guardian, but she never needed to strike the bell. It rang by itself whenever any time a heart nearby remembered how to be unafraid. and on quiet nights, if you listen across any ocean, you can still hear it. The bell that learned the only stroke it ever needed was the gentle beating of a child's fearless heart inside its emptiness. In a valley where night lasted a full year, a small clay lantern lived on the altar of a tiny hermitage. Every evening, the old hermit filled her with sesame oil, lit her cotton wick, and she burned bravely until dawn, believing her only purpose was to push the darkness away. She was proud of her flame, proud of the small circle of light she guarded against the endless night. One winter, the hermit fell ill far down the mountain and could not return. Snow sealed the only path. Day after day, the oil dwindled. On the 40th night, the last drop burned away, the wick blackened, and the flame died. For the first time in her life, the lantern sat in absolute darkness. Terror rose inside her clay heart. "I am nothing without light," she wept. "I am only useful when I burn." The darkness, vast and fragrant with distant jasmine, wrapped around her like a mother's robe and spoke for the first time. "Little lantern," it said, voice soft as moth wings, "you have spent your whole life fighting me, but I have never been your enemy. I am the cradle that holds every star before it learns to shine. Close your clay eyes and feel." The lantern had no eyes, yet somehow she closed them. She let go of her trembling, of every idea she had about herself. And in that letting go, she felt something impossible begin. A faint glow rose from the very center of her emptiness, not from oil, not from wick, but from her own hollow heart. It was the color of warm honey mixed with moonlight, the color of a smile remembered in the womb. She was shining from within, brighter than any flame she had ever carried. The glow grew until it spilled out of the hermitage door and down the mountain path. Lost travelers who had wandered for months in the year-long night saw the gentle light and found their way to the altar. They sat beside the empty lantern and felt their fear dissolve, because something that had made perfect friends with darkness now radiated more light than 10,000 candles. Spring finally came. The hermit fought his way back through melting snow and found the little lantern still glowing softly in perfect silence. He smiled, bowed until his forehead touched the floor, and never filled her with oil again. She had become the light that is born when even a clay heart stops being afraid of the dark. To this day, in that valley where night once lasted a year, children are taught to sit in complete darkness on the longest night and whisper to their own hearts, "I am not afraid." And somewhere inside their chest, a gentle, honey-colored glow always answers, reminding them that the brightest flame is the one that has learned to burn backwards, from emptiness into boundless light. Far in the north, there flowed a river, who sang only one note, low, endless, perfect. Every creature for 100 leagues came to listen. Deer stood motionless on her banks. Birds forgot to fly. Even stones leaned closer, afraid to miss a single vibration. Then one spring, a young otter, full of curiosity and mischief, swam up and asked, "Beautiful river, why do you sing only one note? Don't you know hundreds of songs?" The river answered with her single note, softer than ever, almost shy. The otter laughed. "One note is boring." With the help of beavers and clever crows, he built dams of branches and stones, splitting the river into dozens of small streams that chattered, giggled, splashed, argued. For a whole year, the valley rang with 1,000 noisy little songs, but no one came to listen anymore. The deer wandered away. The birds flew south early. The stones grew bored and slept. The otter grew old. One night he lay on the bank, Ears full of shallow music, heart strangely empty. He dreamed of the old single note, deep as the first heartbeat of the world. He woke crying and began tearing down every dam with his tired paws. Slowly, slowly, the river returned to herself. When the last branch floated away, she gathered all her scattered voices and sang her one note again, deeper now, richer, carrying within it every small song she had ever been forced to become. Every creature returned. The otter pressed his ear to the water and wept with joy. From that day on, whenever anyone asked why the river sang only one note, the old otter would answer, because one note that holds everything can rest inside is greater than 1,000 notes that hold nothing. In the ancient city of Vaishal, there lived a beggar so poor that his only possession was the small patch of sunlight that fell across his corner every morning. People passing by laughed. "Old man, you own nothing." He would smile and reply, "I possess the sun itself, and I give it away freely to everyone who walks past." One terrible winter, the sky stayed clouded for 40 days and 40 nights. No ray reached the city. People grew pale, hearts heavy, hope thin. The beggar sat in his usual place, palms open on his knees. On the 41st morning, a single golden ray broke through the clouds and rested exactly in his empty hands like a tame bird. He lifted his hands and offered the ray to a shivering child. The ray grew brighter. He offered it to an old woman coughing in the cold. Brighter still. By noon, he stood in the marketplace, giving away sunlight with both hands, and the entire city bathed in golden warmth, though the clouds had not parted anywhere else. The king sent soldiers to arrest him for sorcery. When they seized his arms, the light vanished and winter returned colder than before. The people cried out in fear. The king, wiser than his crown, ordered the soldiers to release the beggar and bow low. The moment they did, the beggar opened his empty hands again, and sunlight poured forth like rivers of warm honey, filling every street, every heart, every shadowed corner until the city glowed from within. From that day on, no one in Vaishal ever feared winter again, because they knew the beggar was still sitting on his corner, giving away the sun he did not own, teaching everyone that the less you try to grasp, the more the universe is willing to flow through you. And sometimes, on the coldest mornings, if you walk through any city with open palms and a soft heart, you may feel a gentle warmth settle in your hands, the beggar's gift, still traveling the world, looking for the next person brave enough to give away what was never theirs to keep. High on the roof of the world lived a snow lion, whose roar could shake avalanches from the peaks. Every creature trembled at the sound. Even the wind changed direction when he opened his mouth. One dawn, he found a tiny mouse half frozen in the snow. Instead of eating it, something vast and tender moved in his fierce heart. He picked the mouse up gently in his teeth and carried it to his cave. There he breathed warm breath over it until the mouse twitched, opened its eyes, and began to shake, not from cold, but from terror of the lion's face. The lion tried to roar, "Do not be afraid," but the roar only made the mouse tremble harder. So the lion closed his great mouth and tried something he had never tried in 10,000 winters. He purred. At first it was a rusty, awkward sound, like distant thunder embarrassed to be gentle, but he kept trying. All winter he practiced purring while the mouse slept, curled against the warm fur of his chest. By spring, his purr had become the softest, deepest, most healing sound in the entire Himalaya. Animals traveled thousands of miles to lie near the cave and let the purr dissolve every knot of fear inside them. Anger melted. grief softened. Even avalanches paused mid-fall, ashamed of their violence. When the snow lion finally lay down to die, every creature of the mountains gathered in silence. He purred one last time, a purr so vast it became the warm wind that still blows across Tibet, carrying cubs on its back, calming storms, reminding every fierce heart that even the most terrifying among us can learn the gentlest song when love asks it softly enough. And on quiet nights, if you lie very still in high places, you can still feel it, the snow lion's purr moving through the wind, through your chest, through the whole sleeping world, teaching everything that listens how to be both powerful and harmless at the same time. Long ago, a small girl on pilgrimage to the holy places picked up a smooth river pebble and whispered to it, "Grow big, little stone, so that when I am old I can find you again and know I kept my promise to return." She pressed the pebble to her heart, then gently placed it in a mountain spring and walked on. The pebble sank and rested on the bottom, smiling at the child's sweetness. Years passed. Decades, centuries. Every drop of water that touched the pebble carried away one microscopic grain of earth and gifted it one microscopic grain of minerals in return. Slowly, invisibly, the pebble grew. First it became a rock, then a boulder, then a hill, then a mountain so tall that clouds used it as a walking stick and eagles built nests in its beard of pine trees. One autumn day, an old woman with snow-white hair climbed the mountain slowly, leaning on a bamboo staff. At the summit, she found a small shrine built long ago by unknown hands. Inside the shrine lay one perfectly smooth pebble with the faint imprint of a child's thumb still visible on its surface. The old woman pressed the pebble to her lips, to her forehead, to her heart, and remembered everything. She had kept her promise. She sat beneath the vast sky, placed the pebble in her palm, closed her eyes, and died smiling. The mountain, which had been her childhood wish, kept alive by love, kept growing. It cradled her bones gently inside its heart and rose higher every year, becoming one of the greatest peaks in the world. Climbers who reach that summit at dawn sometimes hear very faintly the sound of a child laughing and an old woman sighing with perfect contentment at the same moment. And they understand, even the smallest intention, held gently for an entire lifetime, watered only by love and trust, can grow large enough to hold the sky. High above the world drifted a cloud who loved the earth so deeply that she made a vow. "I will never rain on anyone who is already weeping." She watched battles, funerals, lovers parting at dusk, and held her tears inside until her belly was heavy as mountains. Centuries passed. She grew vast and dark, swollen with every sorrow she had refused to add to. One summer, she drifted over a desert where a lone monk sat dying of thirst beneath a dead acacia tree. She looked down and saw no tears on his cheeks, only the gentlest smile, as though he were greeting an old friend. The cloud could hold back no longer. She let go. All the tears she had saved for thousands of years fell at once, soft, warm, endless. The desert bloomed overnight into a garden of lotuses the size of wagon wheels. The monk drank from a single petal, bowed to the sky, and died peacefully beneath sudden shade. The cloud, now empty and luminous, discovered she was no longer a cloud at all. She had become sky. From that day forward, whenever anyone anywhere begins to cry, they suddenly feel cool rain on their cheeks even under clear skies, and they look up to see nothing but blue smiling down. They understand. Even grief, when fully allowed, becomes the water that grows gardens in deserts we never knew were waiting inside us. On a deserted island stood an ancient bronze bell, cracked the day the last monk died 900 years ago. Vines grew through its wounds. Birds nested in its mouth. One full moon night, a shipwrecked nun washed ashore, soaked and shivering. She climbed the broken steps, entered the ruined temple, and bowed low before the silent bell. Every day she sat beneath it and chanted the Heart Sutra, though no one was there to hear. On the 1000th night, when she reached the words, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form," the bell rang once, deep, clear, perfect. The nun wept. She had not touched it. Every night after that, at the exact moment she whispered, "Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate," the bell rang by itself, a single note that travelled across oceans and entered the dreams of grieving mothers, lonely sailors, children lost in forests. Pilgrims began arriving. They sat in silence, and the bell rang for each of them at the precise instant their heart finally understood. Some heard it after one night, some after a lifetime. The nun grew old and died beneath the bell, smiling. The pilgrims kept coming. The bell still rings, though no hand has touched it for 1,000 years. If you sail to that island on a full moon night and sit very quietly with your palms open, you will hear it too, ringing exactly when you stop waiting for it, telling you in one perfect note that you were never abandoned, only listening in the wrong direction. On the floor of the deepest ocean lived an ancient tortoise whose shell was said to hold the entire world on its back. Every tired creature, whale, octopus, seahorse, came to rest upon him. One day a young crab asked, "Grandfather, aren't you weary of carrying everything?" The tortoise blinked slowly and answered, "Child, I carried the world long before any of you climbed on. The difference is that now I notice." The crab felt sorry. That night he gathered every sea creature and whispered, "Let us carry the tortoise for once." They tried. Thousands of crabs, octopuses, fish, whales pushed and pulled. The tortoise did not move. Finally, the smallest seahorse curled his tiny tail around one barnacle on the great shell and pulled with all his might. The tortoise rose an inch, then another. Slowly, gently, the entire ocean lifted the tortoise and carried him to the surface where moonlight touched his shell for the first time in 10 million years. The tortoise opened his ancient eyes and wept with joy. For one night the world rested while its creatures carried their carrier. At dawn, the tortoise sank back down, smiling. From that day on, whenever any creature felt too heavy, they remembered the night the ocean carried the world, and they felt lighter, knowing that even the greatest burden becomes gentle when everyone agrees to carry each other, even if only for one soft night. In a cave lit by a single candle, a young monk asked his teacher, "Master, why does the flame always reach upward?" The teacher said nothing. That night the candle burned lower and lower until only a tiny stub remained. The young monk fell asleep. When he woke, the candle stood tall again, burning brightly. Every day after that, the candle burned downward with the sun, shrinking, shrinking, until it was almost gone. And every night it burned upward, growing taller and brighter until dawn. The young monk asked, "Master, how is this possible?" The teacher smiled. When the heart learns to give light without losing itself, even fire forgets which way is down. The candle burned like that for 30 years, growing in darkness, giving itself away in light. On the night the teacher died, the flame rose straight up through the roof of the cave and became a star that has never moved from its place. The young monk, now old and grey, still sits beneath that star every night. If you look up at the right moment, you can see it flickering gently, burning backwards, teaching every heart that watches that true light never diminishes by being given away. It only learns how to shine in both directions at once. During a great war, a temple burned to the ground. The monks fled. Only the lotus pond in the courtyard remained, surrounded by roaring flames. In the center of the pond grew one white lotus, still closed. The fire came closer, closer. The lotus did not shut tighter. It opened. Petal by petal unfolded until it was larger than a cartwheel, glowing softly in the heat. A child running from the burning village saw the lotus and stopped. The fire paused, ashamed. The child stepped into the pond. The water was cool as moonlight. She climbed into the heart of the lotus and fell asleep. The temple burned to ash around her. When the monks returned at dawn, they found the child sleeping peacefully inside a perfect lotus that showed no trace of fire. They woke her gently. She opened her eyes and said, "I dreamed the whole world was burning, and love opened in the middle and was not burned." She grew up to become the greatest teacher of her age. The lotus pond still grows in that place. No fire has ever touched it again. And whenever war threatens anywhere in the world, people say a single white lotus can sometimes be seen opening in the darkest night, reminding every heart that even in the middle of the worst flames, love can choose to open instead of close, and nothing can burn what has already become peace. In a village that existed only in dreams, an old woman named Upala rose every night carrying a bamboo broom. She walked to the edge of the lake, where the moon's reflection lay scattered into 1,000 trembling pieces by the wind. There she began to sweep, not the ground, but the water itself, gently gathering every broken fragment of silver light back into one perfect circle. Children watching from their warm beds would whisper, "Grandmother, why do you sweep the moon?" She never paused. "So tomorrow will find it whole," she answered, voice soft as moth wings. Years passed. Her back grew bent, her hair white as moonlight itself. One night, she did not come. The children ran to her tiny hut and found her lying peacefully on her mat, broom folded across her chest like a beloved child, smiling the smile of someone who has just finished the most important work in the universe. They carried her body to the lake and laid her gently on the water. The moon, whole and luminous, rose slowly from the surface, rested on her heart for a long moment, then lifted her upward, higher and higher, until she became part of its light. From that night on, whenever the moon is full and low, dreamers sometimes see the faint silhouette of an old woman with a broom walking slowly across its face, sweeping, gathering every scattered piece of the world with infinite patience. And children who wake from nightmares look up and instantly feel safe, because they know someone is still sweeping the moon, making certain that tomorrow's light will be whole, and that no heart, no matter how broken, will ever be left out of the circle. In a poor village during a terrible famine, a farmer had only one handful of rice left in the entire house. A wandering monk knocked at his door, thin and weary from the road. Without hesitation, the farmer poured every last grain into the monk's bowl. The monk looked into the empty pot, smiled, and poured the rice back. "Keep this," he said. "It will feed you forever." The farmer laughed sadly, thinking it a beautiful lie, but he kept the grains in a small clay jar on the altar. Every morning he took exactly one grain, cooked it, and somehow that single grain became enough rice to fill every bowl in the house. His children grew strong. His wife's cheeks filled out again. Neighbors came and were fed. This went on for 60 years. When the farmer lay dying, he called his children and showed them the jar. It was still full to the brim. He smiled and whispered, "I have eaten the same rice every day of my life, and it has never diminished." This is what happens when something is given completely. It becomes inexhaustible. He died peacefully. The children kept the jar. Their children kept the jar. Their children's children keep it still. To this day, in that village, there stands a small clay jar that has never been empty, though generation after generation has eaten from it. They call it the rice of perfect giving, and they say that if you ever offer your very last anything with an open heart and no thought of return, the universe will keep that offering full forever, and you will never know hunger again, not of body, not of heart, not of soul. The tallest mountain in the world grew very proud. "I am immovable," it boasted to the sky. "Even time respects me." One spring, a tiny nun with bare feet and a walking stick, made from a bamboo flute, began to climb. She climbed for 90 days and 90 nights, singing softly under her breath. On the 91st morning, she reached the summit. The mountain prepared to impress her with its height and silence. The nun bowed, not to the mountain, but to the vast emptiness in front of the mountain. Then she sat and began to play her flute. The melody was simple, endless, full of love for something the mountain could not see. The mountain listened. For 7 days and 7 nights it listened. On the 7th night, it understood that the nun was playing to the emptiness that held the mountain, the emptiness that was actually far larger than the mountain itself. Tears of stone rolled down its granite cheeks. Slowly, slowly, the tallest mountain in the world bowed until its proud peak touched the nun's feet. The nun stopped playing, smiled, and walked down the bowed mountain as easily as walking down a gentle hillside. From that day on, the mountain has remained slightly bent, an eternal bow to the emptiness that is greater than any height. Climbers who reach the summit at dawn sometimes hear the faint sound of a bamboo flute coming from inside the stone, reminding every heart that true greatness is measured only by willingness to bow. In the season when lotuses close forever, an old monk named Badaji lay dying on the bank of a wild river. His disciples had carried him for weeks, hoping to reach the stupa on the far shore, but the waters raged and no boat would cross in the storm. The monk opened his eyes one last time and whispered, "Do not grieve, my ferry is coming." The disciples looked around. There was nothing but wind and rain. Then a single butterfly, wings the color of sunrise and half drowned, landed on the monk's chest. The disciples laughed through tears. "This is your ferry." The butterfly opened its wings once, twice, and began to grow, larger, larger, until its wings spanned the entire river, shimmering with every color that has ever existed, and some that have not yet been dreamed. Gently, carefully, it lifted the monk onto its back and rose, slow as a sigh, above the roaring water. The disciples watched, breathless, as the butterfly carried their teacher safely to the far shore, set him beneath the stupa, folded its vast wings, and became small again. It rested on his heart until the pyre was lit, then rose with the smoke and dissolved into light. From that day forward, whenever a monk or nun of that lineage comes to die, the disciples no longer weep. They simply open the window and wait. And always, without fail, a butterfly arrives, sometimes orange, sometimes blue, sometimes white as moonlight, and carries the dying one across whatever river waits between this breath and the next. No one knows where the butterflies come from. They only know that death, when met with trust, has the gentlest wings in all the worlds. Between two sal trees blooming out of season, the Buddha lay on his right side, head resting on his hand, perfectly at ease. His disciples circled him, some weeping, some silent. Ananda asked through tears, "Lord, will you give us one final teaching?" The Buddha opened his eyes. They were deeper than space, kinder than every mother who ever lived. He said nothing with words. He simply breathed. Inhale, slow, complete, receiving every sorrow ever felt by every being in every world, like a mother lifting her crying child to her heart. Exhale, slow, complete, releasing every sorrow transformed into peace, like a child opening its hand to free a healed butterfly. He did this 7 times. On the 7th exhale, the breath did not return. The sal trees showered him with petals that hung suspended in the air like soft snow that had forgotten how to fall. The earth trembled once, gently, like a child turning over in deep sleep. When the first ray of dawn touched the place where the body had been, the disciples saw only empty robes folded neatly and a single white lotus resting where his heart had been. They understood. He had not died. He had become the space inside every breath where coming and going finally rest. From that moment until this very one, whenever any being anywhere breathes with full awareness and love, the Buddha breathes with them. He is closer now than when he walked beneath the Bodhi tree. He is the gentle pause between your inhale and your exhale, smiling, waiting for you to notice. So now, beloved, close your eyes. Inhale, receive everything, the whole tired day, the whole tired life, the whole tired universe. Exhale, release everything with love, again and again. There's nothing else to do. There never was. Good night, good night, good night. The old woman is sweeping the moon clean for you. The rice is filling every empty place inside you. The mountain has bowed so you can walk gently. The butterfly is resting on your heart. The Buddha is breathing you home. Sleep, sleep, sleep. You are already there.